Tonight, we gather in this quiet space to receive the Buddha's most precious offerings. Stories that illuminate the path from suffering to peace, from confusion to clarity, from restlessness to rest. You don't need to have studied Buddhism or know anything about meditation. You just need to be here, exactly as you are. The Buddha taught that peace isn't something we achieve or earn. It's something we uncover, like brushing away dust from a mirror that's always been reflecting light. Tonight's stories will help you brush away that dust, gently, without force, with the kind of patience that knows you're already whole. This is Buddha Bedtime Stories, your sanctuary for the sacred ordinary, where ancient wisdom meets your very human need for rest and understanding. Before we journey into these teachings, I have a question for you. What do these Buddhist stories bring to your nights? Is it peace that finds you here? A quieting of the restless thoughts that chase themselves in circles? Or perhaps a deeper sense of connection to something vast and timeless? Please share in the comments. Your words might be exactly what another listener needs to hear. The stories and teachings we'll explore aren't separate from your life. They're about your worries, your hopes, your relationships, your struggles to find ease in a difficult world. The Buddha spoke to the human condition with such clarity and compassion that his words still land in our hearts today, as relevant as ever. You might drift in and out of awareness as we go. You might fall asleep before we finish. This is not only okay, it's perfect. These teachings work on levels deeper than the conscious mind. Let them do their work while you rest. Take a moment now to truly settle yourself. Notice where your body makes contact with what supports you. Is there anywhere that's calling for adjustment? Maybe your arms need to rest differently, or your neck wants more support. Listen to your body's wisdom and respond with kindness. Find that position where you could stay for a long while, where comfort becomes the foundation for deep listening. Now bring your attention to your breath, but don't try to change it. Just notice it. Feel one complete breath cycle, from the first whisper of inhale to the final release of exhale, and one more, this time consciously inviting your whole body to soften with the out-breath. Beautiful. Let us begin this journey together with our first story. There was a water bearer in a mountain village who carried water from the stream to the town each day. She used a wooden pole across her shoulders with a large pot hanging from each end. One pot was perfect, without flaw, and always delivered a full portion of water at journey's end. The other pot had a crack running down one side, and by the time the water bearer reached town, it was only half full. This went on for 2 years. The perfect pot was proud of its accomplishment, delivering full measures each day, fulfilling the purpose for which it was made. The cracked pot was ashamed of its imperfection, distressed that it could only do half of what it was meant to do. Finally, the cracked pot spoke to the water bearer one morning by the stream. "I am ashamed of myself. I apologize to you." "Why?" asked the water bearer. "What are you ashamed of?" "For 2 years, I have been able to deliver only half my load because this crack in my side causes water to leak out all the way back to town. Because of my flaw, you have to do more work and you don't get full value for your efforts." The water bearer smiled kindly. "As we return to town today, I want you to notice the flowers along the path." As they walked up the hill from the stream, The cracked pot did notice the beautiful wildflowers growing along one side of the path. This cheered it somewhat, but at the end of the trail it still felt bad because it had leaked out half its water again. The water bearer said to the pot, "Did you notice that there were flowers only on your side of the path, but not on the other pot's side? That's because I've always known about your crack, and I took advantage of it. I planted flower seeds on your side of the path, and every day, while we've walked back, you've watered them. For 2 years, I have been able to pick these beautiful flowers to decorate my home and to sell at market. Without you being just the way you are, I would not have this beauty to grace my life." The cracked pot was silent, absorbing this revelation. What it had thought was its greatest weakness had been serving a purpose all along. The crack that made it imperfect for one purpose made it perfect for another purpose it never knew existed. A student who heard this story asked the local Zen teacher, "But wouldn't it have been better if the pot had no crack? Then the water bearer would have had twice as much water and could have watered the flowers separately." The teacher smiled. "You're thinking of efficiency. The story is teaching about purpose. The cracked pot thought its only purpose was to carry water to town. It judged itself a failure at this purpose. But it was also watering flowers, creating beauty, serving a function it never imagined. What appears to be failure at one purpose may be success at a different purpose we don't yet recognize." The teacher continued, "Most of us are like the cracked pot. We have flaws, weaknesses, places where we leak, ways we don't measure up to our idea of what we should be. We judge ourselves harshly for these cracks. But often, these very flaws are serving purposes we cannot see. The things we think make us inadequate may be making us exactly adequate for something we don't yet understand." A woman in the village heard this teaching and thought about her own life. She had always been too sensitive, too easily moved to tears, too affected by others' suffering. In a society that valued stoicism and emotional control, she felt defective. She tried to toughen up, to be stronger, to not leak emotions everywhere she went. But then she noticed something. The very sensitivity she judged as weakness made her extraordinarily good at caring for those who were ill or grieving. People who were suffering would seek her out because her emotional openness created a safe space for their own grief. Her tears gave others permission to cry. Her tender heart helped heal other tender hearts. She was a cracked pot, yes, leaking emotional responses all along the path. But in her wake, flowers of compassion and healing grew. What she had thought was her failure was actually serving a purpose she had never imagined. A man in the village had a different crack. He couldn't focus on one thing for long. His mind would jump from interest to interest, never specializing, never becoming an expert in anything. In a society that valued mastery and deep expertise, he felt scattered and inadequate. But then he recognized what his crack had created. Because he knew a little about many things, he could connect ideas across different fields. He could see patterns that specialists missed. He could translate between different domains of knowledge, creating bridges where others saw only walls. The very quality he had judged as inability to focus was actually ability to see relationships. His crack was watering flowers he had never noticed. The teacher who told the story of the cracked pot would say, "Before you try to fix yourself, before you work so hard to seal up all your cracks, pause. Ask yourself, what is this crack watering? Where are flowers growing because of my imperfections? What purposes might I be serving that I haven't recognized because I'm so busy judging myself as broken? This doesn't mean we shouldn't work on genuine problems or grow beyond destructive patterns, but it means we should look carefully at what we think are flaws. Sometimes, what appears to be a weakness is actually a strength in disguise. Sometimes, what we're failing at in one area, we're succeeding at in another area we haven't valued or noticed. The perfect pot in the story delivered water reliably, but it created no beauty. It fulfilled its intended function, but nothing more. The cracked pot, by failing at perfect water delivery, succeeded at something the perfect pot could never do. It made flowers grow. Tonight, as you rest, you might think about your own cracks, the ways you leak, the places you feel inadequate or broken. Instead of judging these cracks harshly, you might ask, what flowers might these cracks be watering? What beauty might be growing along the path of my imperfection? You are not meant to be a perfect vessel that holds everything in. You are meant to be authentically yourself, cracks and all. And those cracks, those places where you leak, those ways you fail to be perfect, they might be creating more beauty in the world than you realize. Rest now in acceptance of your cracked nature. You don't need to be sealed up and perfect. You're serving purposes you don't even know about, watering flowers you can't see, creating beauty through the very imperfections you judge so harshly. You are enough, cracks and all. More than enough. You are exactly what the world needs you to be. In a town famous for its craftsmen, there lived a clockmaker named Kenji who created timepieces of extraordinary precision. His clocks kept perfect time. His watches never gained or lost a second. People came from distant cities to purchase his work, and his reputation spread widely. But something happened to Kenji as his skill grew. He became obsessed with time in a way that began to consume his life. He would check his clocks constantly, comparing them against each other, anxious if any showed even the slightest deviation. He scheduled every moment of his day, allocating specific minutes to each task. He kept detailed records of how long everything took, analyzing his efficiency, trying to waste no time. His wife would call him for dinner, and he would arrive exactly at the scheduled moment, not a minute early or late. His children would ask him to play, and he would check his schedule, finding a 15-minute slot and setting a timer so he wouldn't run over. He measured everything, tracked everything, lived his entire life by the clock. People admired his discipline. Kenji wastes no time, they would say. He's so efficient, so organized. But his family felt differently. His wife felt like he was never really present, always watching the time, even during conversations. His children learned to stop asking him to play spontaneously, knowing he would need to check if that time was allocated. One day, Kenji's elderly father became very ill. Kenji visited him at the scheduled time each day, staying for exactly the planned duration. On what turned out to be his father's last day, Kenji was sitting beside the bed when his timer went off, indicating his visit slot was complete. "I have to go," Kenji said, standing up. "I have a client appointment in 20 minutes, and it takes 15 minutes to get there, so I need to leave now to be on time." His father looked at him with sad eyes. "Kenji, I may not be here tomorrow." "I know, father. I'll come back tomorrow at 2 p.m. as scheduled." His father died that evening, while Kenji was home eating dinner at precisely 6 p.m. as his schedule dictated. At the funeral, Kenji's father's friend, an old Zen monk named Joshu, approached him. "Your father loved you very much," Joshu said. "I know," Kenji replied. "I visited him every day." "Did you?" Joshu asked gently. "Or did you visit the time slot you had allocated for visiting?" Kenji felt something crack inside his chest. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. The monk was right. He had been there in body but not in presence. His mind had been on the clock, on the schedule, on the next appointment. He had measured out his love in timed portions, and now his father was gone, and all those precisely measured visits felt hollow. "I wasted it," Kenji whispered. "All that time I tracked so carefully, all that time I organized and measured, and I wasted the time that mattered." "You didn't waste it," Joshu said, "but you didn't fully live it either. You were so busy measuring time that you forgot to experience it." In his grief and shock, something shifted in Kenji. He went home and looked at all his clocks, all these devices he had spent years perfecting. They ticked away, measuring, dividing, tracking. And he realized they were measuring something that couldn't really be measured. A moment of real connection with his child had no measurable duration. The joy of a beautiful sunset didn't fit into scheduled slots. The depth of presence with another person couldn't be quantified in minutes and seconds. He had been living as if time were the most important thing, when actually what happened in time was what mattered. The next day, Kenji did something that shocked the town. He closed his clock shop. He put away his watches and timers. He stopped scheduling his days in measured blocks. His wife thought he had lost his mind. "What will we do? How will we live?" "We'll live," Kenji said simply. "Actually live. Not to measure our living. When I'm hungry, I'll eat. When I'm tired, I'll sleep. When our children want to play, I'll play. Not because it's scheduled, but because the moment calls for it." He still made clocks. It was his craft, his art, but he made them differently now. He would work on one until it felt complete, not until a timer said his work session was over. He would stop if he felt called to watch the sunset, or talk with a neighbor, or sit with his wife. He stopped trying to be efficient and started trying to be present. At first, this new way of living felt chaotic to him. Without schedules and timers, how would he know what to do? But gradually, he discovered a different kind of guidance. His body told him when to rest. His interest told him when to work. His relationships told him when a connection was needed. Life itself had a rhythm that didn't require clocks. His children noticed the change immediately. Their father would now play with them until the play naturally ended, not until a timer buzzed. He would listen to their stories without glancing at a watch. He was actually there, fully present, not counting the minutes until he could move to the next scheduled item. One evening, his daughter climbed into his lap and said, "Daddy, you're different now." "How so?" Kenji asked. "Before, you were here but not here. Now you're really here." Kenji felt tears in his eyes. "I'm learning," he said, "that being here is more important than being on time." Word spread about the clockmaker who had stopped caring about time. Some people thought he had gone mad. How could a clockmaker not care about time? But others were curious. They came to talk with him. "How do you live without schedules?" they asked. "How do you get everything done?" "I get done what needs to get done," Kenji replied. "But I've stopped confusing being busy with being productive. I've stopped measuring my worth by how efficiently I use time. Time isn't something to use or waste. It's what we live in. And I was so concerned with managing it that I forgot to inhabit it." He showed them the clocks he was making now. They were beautiful, functional, but somehow different. "These clocks can tell you what time it is," he explained, "but they can't tell you what to do with that time. They can measure duration, but not meaning. I made the mistake of letting the measurer become the master. The clock told me how to live, rather than serving my living." Joshu the monk visited Kenji's workshop months after the funeral. He watched Kenji work for a while, noticing the quality of attention the clockmaker brought to his craft, the way he would pause to watch light move across his workbench, the way he seemed fully engaged with what he was doing. "You've learned your father's final teaching," Joshu said. "What teaching?" "That life can't be saved up or stored or perfectly managed. It can only be lived moment by moment with full presence or with partial presence. Your father's death reminded you that the time we have is uncertain, and that measuring it carefully doesn't make it last longer or mean more. Only living it fully does that." Kenji nodded. "I used to think I was honoring time by tracking it so carefully. But I was actually dishonoring it. I was treating time as an enemy to be managed rather than a gift to be received. I was so afraid of wasting time that I wasted life." Years later, people still bought Kenji's clocks, but they also came to him for a different kind of wisdom. They would ask, "How do I find more time?" And he would reply, "You can't find more time. You can only be more present to the time you have. Stop measuring and start experiencing. Stop tracking and start living." The clock is useful for coordination, for knowing when to meet others, and for practical matters. But it's a terrible master. Don't let it tell you that measured time is more valuable than experienced time. Tonight, as you rest, notice if you're measuring. Are you tracking how long it takes you to fall asleep? Are you calculating how many hours of rest you'll get? Are you monitoring your progress toward relaxation? What if you stopped measuring and started experiencing? What if this moment of rest didn't need to be timed or tracked or evaluated? What if you could simply be here, in this unmeasured moment, present to breath and sensation without any concern for duration? Your life is not a clock to be wound and measured. It's an experience to be lived and felt. Tonight, forget time. Let yourself drift into timelessness, where there's no past to regret and no future to plan for. Just this eternal now that needs no measurement because it simply is. Rest in the unmeasured moment. That's where real life happens. Not in the counted minutes, but in the presence that fills them. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us turn to a tale about recognition and the true nature of worth. This is the next story. There was a painter named Hiro who specialized in landscapes, particularly sunsets. He would travel to scenic locations, set up his easel, and capture the magnificent colors of the evening sky. His paintings were admired and purchased by wealthy collectors throughout the region, but Hiro harbored a secret anxiety. He worried that beauty only existed when someone was there to witness it. If a sunset occurred and no one saw it, was it still beautiful? If a mountain stood in perfect light, but no human eye appreciated it, did that beauty mean anything? This philosophical worry grew into an obsession. Hiro began to feel that his purpose as an artist was essential, that without him and others like him to witness and record beauty, that beauty was somehow wasted, meaningless, lost. He expressed this concern to a Zen monk named Daigu, who lived near one of Hiro's favorite painting locations. If I didn't come here to paint these sunsets, they would just happen and disappear with no one to appreciate them. Doesn't that seem like a waste? Daigu looked at Hiro with gentle amusement. Let me ask you something. Before humans existed, before there were any conscious beings to witness them, did sunsets occur? Yes, I suppose so. And were they beautiful? How could they be beautiful if there was no one to see them? Ah, Daigu said. So you believe beauty is created by the observer rather than existing in the observed? This question troubled Hiro. He had always thought beauty was a quality inherent in things, but maybe he was wrong. Maybe beauty was just a human interpretation, a meaning we project onto neutral phenomena. Daigu continued, Tonight, stay at my temple. In the morning, before dawn, I'll show you something. That night, Hiro could barely sleep, wondering what the monk would show him. Before sunrise, Daigu woke him and led him to a secluded valley far from any human habitation. We're going to leave now, Daigu said, and we're not going to look back. This evening, the sunset will occur here, with no human to witness it. According to your theory, that sunset will not be beautiful because there's no one to appreciate it. But how will we know? Hiro asked. Exactly, Daigu smiled. How will we know? And does not knowing change anything about what actually happens? They left the valley and returned to the temple. All day, Hiro thought about the sunset occurring in that empty valley. The sky is going through its evening transformation with no human eye to see it. Colors blooming and fading with no one to call them beautiful. That evening, sitting with Daigu as the sun set over the temple, Hiro said, Right now, in that valley, the sunset is happening. And it's the same sky, the same light, the same colors as here. The only difference is, we're not there to see it. And? Daigu prompted. And I realize my presence doesn't create the beauty. It just allows me to participate in it. The sunset doesn't need me to witness it to be what it is. My witnessing is a gift I receive, not a gift I give to the sunset. Daigu nodded. The mountains were beautiful before humans arrived and will be beautiful after humans are gone. The sunset performs its daily miracle whether anyone watches or not. Beauty is not dependent on observers. It exists. Our observation of it is our privilege, not our creation or our responsibility. This understanding transformed Hiro's relationship with his art. He had been painting with a sense of urgent mission, as if he needed to capture and preserve beauty before it was lost to obscurity. Now, he painted with gratitude, recognizing that he was participating in beauty, not rescuing it. His paintings changed. They became less about controlling and capturing and more about celebrating and sharing. Critics said his later work had a quality of joy that his earlier, technically superior work had lacked. One student asked Hiro, "If beauty exists without observers, why paint at all? Why bother witnessing it?" "Because witnessing is a joy," Hiro replied, "not a duty. I don't paint because the sunset needs me. I paint because I need the sunset. Being present to beauty enriches me. Sharing that experience with others through my paintings is a gift I offer. But the beauty itself doesn't depend on my offering. It simply is." He told the student about the sunset in the empty valley. Somewhere right now, a magnificent sunset is occurring that no human will ever see. No photograph will capture it. No painting will record it. It will happen and end and be gone forever from human knowledge. And that's perfect. That sunset doesn't exist for us. It exists because the earth turns and light bends and atmosphere scatters color. We're fortunate when we get to witness it, but our witnessing isn't required. This lesson extended beyond sunsets to everything in Hiro's life. He realized he'd been placing himself at the center of existence, as if things needed him to matter. But actually, everything had its own existence, its own worth, independent of his awareness or appreciation. The tree in his garden was a tree whether he noticed it or not. The bird singing in the morning was completing its nature whether he heard it or not. The stars were shining whether he looked up at them or not. His presence as an observer was optional, not essential. Everything existed quite fully without him. "This could feel depressing," he told Daigu later, "realizing that I'm not essential, that everything would continue without me." "Or it could feel liberating," Daigu replied. "You don't have to carry the burden of making things matter. They already matter. Your role is simply to participate, to witness, to celebrate when you're fortunate enough to be present." This is a much lighter burden than thinking you must observe everything to validate its existence. Years later, when Hiro was old and knew he was dying, a young painter came to him, worried. "When I die, who will paint these mountains? Who will witness these sunsets? Will all this beauty be wasted?" Hiro smiled, remembering his own younger anxieties. "The beauty will be what it has always been, complete and independent of observers. Other people will witness it. And even if no people witnessed it, it would still be itself, still be beautiful in its own right. You're not the author of beauty. You're just a fortunate participant in it. Paint while you can, witness what you're able to, and rest easy knowing that beauty doesn't depend on you to exist." Tonight, as you rest, you might find relief in this teaching. The world doesn't need you to be constantly observing, appreciating, and validating it for it to have worth. Your life has value. Your presence matters, but not because everything depends on you. Rather, because you get to participate in existence, to witness beauty, to experience being alive. This moment, right now, is happening whether you're paying attention or not. The universe is unfolding whether you're conscious of it or not. You can rest completely, releasing all concern that you need to be witnessing and validating and appreciating every moment. Some moments will happen without you. Some beauty will bloom and fade unseen. And that's perfect. That's how it should be. Rest in the understanding that you're not the center of existence, but a participant in it, a grateful guest, not a required audience. Let the world exist without your constant attention. Let beauty be beautiful, whether you're watching or not. This is freedom. This is peace. This is the deep rest of knowing you can stop, can close your eyes, can let go completely, and everything will continue being exactly what it is. In a rice field, at the edge of a village, there stood a scarecrow that the farmer had erected to keep birds away from his crops. The scarecrow stood perfectly still, day after day, doing nothing but being present in the field. Its arms were outstretched, its simple face looked out over the growing rice, and it never moved from its position. A merchant named Kazuo would pass this field every day on his way to town. Each time he saw the scarecrow, he felt a strange mixture of emotions. Sometimes he felt pity for it, standing there uselessly. Sometimes he felt contempt, thinking what a waste it was to occupy space without doing anything. Sometimes he felt anxious, as if the scarecrow's stillness was somehow judging his own constant busyness. One day, Kazuo stopped and spoke to the scarecrow, though he felt foolish doing so. "You just stand there," he said. "You don't move, you don't work, you don't accomplish anything." What kind of existence is that? A Zen monk named Hakuin happened to be walking past and overheard this one-sided conversation. He approached Kazuo with a smile. "You think the scarecrow does nothing?" Hakuin asked. "It just stands there," Kazuo replied, embarrassed to have been caught talking to a scarecrow. "It accomplishes nothing." "Does it keep birds from eating the rice?" Hakuin asked. "Well, yes, I suppose that's its purpose." "And does it accomplish this purpose by running around, flailing, working hard, being busy?" Kazuo looked at the scarecrow more carefully. "No. It accomplishes it by simply being present, by standing still. Then it accomplishes everything necessary without appearing to do anything at all," Hakuin said. "This is Wu Wei, action through non-action, accomplishment through presence rather than busy effort." He gestured to the scarecrow. "Look at it. It doesn't worry about whether it's being productive enough. It doesn't stress about its purpose or question its worth. It doesn't compare itself to other scarecrows or feel inadequate. It simply stands, perfectly still, completely present, and in that stillness, it fulfills its function perfectly." Kazuo was quiet, thinking. He realized that he spent his entire life in constant motion, constant busyness, constantly trying to justify his existence through activity and accomplishment. He never allowed himself to simply be still without feeling guilty or anxious about it. "But I'm not a scarecrow," Kazuo protested. "I have things to do, responsibilities, work that requires effort." "Of course," Hakuin agreed. "But do you ever allow yourself to be still without justifying the stillness? Can you ever simply be present without needing to accomplish something, without needing to prove your worth through constant activity?" Kazuo couldn't answer. He realized he couldn't remember the last time he had been truly still without feeling that he was wasting time or being lazy. Hakuin continued. "The scarecrow teaches that sometimes presence itself is the action. Sometimes stillness accomplishes what busyness cannot. Sometimes the greatest wisdom is knowing when to stand perfectly still and let your simple presence be enough." Over the following weeks, Kazuo would stop by the scarecrow regularly. He began to practice standing still beside it, at first for just a minute, then longer. He found it incredibly difficult. His mind would flood with lists of things he should be doing. He would feel guilty for standing idle. He would worry about being seen as lazy. But gradually, he learned what the scarecrow knew: that stillness has its own value, that presence needs no justification, that sometimes the most profound action is no action at all. One day, as Kazuo stood in perfect stillness beside the scarecrow, the farmer approached him. "What are you doing?" the farmer asked. Kazuo smiled. "Learning from your scarecrow. Learning that I don't need to justify my existence through constant motion. Learning that presence itself is sometimes enough." The farmer laughed. "That scarecrow has taught many people. It stands there doing nothing, and yet it teaches more than many teachers who never stop talking. Tonight, as you rest, you can be like the scarecrow. You don't need to justify this stillness. You don't need to be accomplishing something every moment. You don't need to prove your worth through constant activity. Simply being here, present and still, is enough, more than enough. Your presence itself has value. Your stillness serves a purpose, even when it appears to do nothing. Rest without guilt. Be still without anxiety. Stand like the scarecrow in the field of your own life. And let your simple presence be the action that's needed." As we move deeper into the quiet teachings of Zen, we come to a story about seeing clearly and understanding true value. Listen carefully to the next story. In a monastery, there was a meditation hall with a heavy wooden door that was always kept closed during practice sessions. The door had no lock, but everyone treated it as if it were locked, entering only at designated times and never leaving during meditation periods. A visiting monk named Gensho noticed this and asked why no one ever left during meditation, even though the door was clearly unlocked. "It wouldn't be proper," one monk explained. "During practice time, we stay in practice. Leaving would break the container, would disturb others, would show a lack of discipline." "But you could leave if you wanted to?" Gensho asked. "Technically, yes, but we don't." Gensho found this fascinating. These monks were living as if imprisoned during meditation sessions, but the prison existed only in their minds. The door was open. They could leave any time, yet they sat as if bound. He began to notice similar patterns throughout the monastery. People living within invisible constraints, following rules that had no enforcement mechanism, restricting themselves to prisons that had no walls. One day, during a particularly long meditation session, Gensho stood up, walked to the door, opened it, stepped outside into the sunlight, and then walked back in and sat down. The other monks were shocked by this violation of protocol. Afterward, the abbot called Gensho to his chambers. "Why did you leave during meditation?" "To see if I could," Gensho replied, "to test whether the constraint was real or imagined. It was imagined. The door was never locked. I was never actually trapped. I was sitting there by choice, not by compulsion." "But we all know we could leave," the abbot said. "The point is that we choose not to." "Do you really know that?" Gensho asked. "Or have you assumed for so long that you shouldn't leave that you've forgotten you have a choice? There's a difference between staying by conscious choice and staying by habit or assumed constraint. One is freedom. The other is just a comfortable prison." This question disturbed many monks. They began to realize they had been treating many choices as if they were requirements. They had been living within restrictions that no one was actually enforcing. They had imprisoned themselves with beliefs about what they should or shouldn't do. The abbot considered Gensho's point carefully. "You're right," he admitted. "We've been treating the open door as if it were locked. We've been prisoners of our own assumptions. But what do we do with this awareness?" "First, acknowledge it," Gensho said. "See clearly that most of your constraints are chosen, not imposed. Then decide consciously, which constraints serve you? Which do you want to keep? And which are you maintaining out of habit or fear, not because they actually help you?" He gestured toward the meditation hall. "That door has always been open, but if you never test that, if you never actually check whether you could leave, then you're living as if imprisoned, even though you're free. True freedom begins with recognizing which prisons are real and which are imagined." Over the following weeks, the atmosphere in the monastery changed. Monks began questioning which rules actually served their practice and which they followed out of mere habit. They discovered they had internalized many restrictions that had no actual external enforcement. One monk realized he had been afraid to speak his honest opinions for years, not because speaking was forbidden, but because he had decided early on that it was safer to stay quiet. No one had actually silenced him. He had silenced himself. Another monk discovered he had been avoiding certain foods, not because of any monastic rule, but because he had once been told they were inappropriate for monks, and he had never questioned this. The restriction existed only in his belief. A third monk realized he had been limiting his meditation practice to certain times and places, not because practice was restricted to those times, but because he had created a mental rule about when and where meditation counted. "We've been living in prisons of our own making," one monk said during a group discussion. "The doors were open all along. We just never tried to walk through them." Gensho nodded. "Most people live this way. They believe they're trapped in circumstances, jobs, relationships, and patterns of behavior. They believe they have no choice, but often, if they examined closely, they'd discover the constraints are their own beliefs, not external reality. The door was never locked." The abbot asked, "But doesn't this lead to chaos? If everyone starts leaving meditation sessions whenever they want, ignoring the schedule, doing what they please, doesn't the structure fall apart?" "Possibly," Gensho agreed. "But structure maintained through unconscious compliance isn't real structure. It's just a habit pretending to be discipline. True structure comes from conscious choice. When people choose to stay, not because they believe they must, but because they genuinely want to, that's authentic practice. When they stay simply because they never questioned whether they could leave, that's just imprisonment with no walls." He looked around at the gathered monks. "I'm not suggesting you abandon all structure or discipline. I'm suggesting you own your choices. Recognize that you're staying because you choose to, not because you have to. Recognize that the door is open and you're free to leave, and then decide whether to stay or go based on authentic choice rather than assumed constraint." This teaching spread beyond the monastery. People in the nearby town heard about the open door and began examining their own lives. How many constraints were they living under that existed only in their minds? How many prisons had they created for themselves? A woman realized she had been staying in an unhappy marriage not because of any real obstacle to leaving, but because of stories she told herself about what leaving would mean. When she examined these stories, she found they were beliefs, not facts. The door had always been open. A man discovered he had been working at a job he hated for years, believing he had no choice, that his family responsibilities required it. When he looked honestly, he found there were other options he had never seriously considered because he had assumed from the beginning that he was trapped. An elderly person recognized that many of the limitations they experienced weren't from age or circumstance, but from beliefs about what old people could or couldn't do. The constraints were largely self-imposed. The teaching of the open door, people began to say, is that most prisons are mental. We're free more often than we realize. The question isn't whether we can leave, but whether we've been living as if we can't. Years later, the monastery still practiced meditation with a closed door during sessions. But now there was a different quality to it. Everyone knew the door was unlocked. Everyone knew they could leave any time they chose. They stayed not from obligation or assumed constraint, but from authentic choice. The practice deepened because people were choosing it freely, rather than submitting to it from habit or fear. Gensho's simple act of walking out and back in had freed an entire community from invisible prisons, not by tearing down structure, but by revealing that structure maintained by genuine choice is stronger than structure maintained by unconscious compliance. Tonight, as you rest, you might examine the doors in your own life. Which ones do you believe are locked? Which constraints do you accept as unchangeable? What prisons are you living in that exist only in your beliefs? The door has always been open. You've always been freer than you realized. The constraints that feel so solid are often just habits of thought, beliefs you've never questioned, stories you've told yourself for so long that you mistake them for truth. You're not as trapped as you think. You have more choices than you've acknowledged. The prison is mostly mental, and mental prisons can be walked out of the moment you realize the door was never actually locked. This doesn't mean every choice is easy or without consequences, but it means you're choosing even when you believe you have no choice. And recognizing that you're choosing is the beginning of real freedom. Rest now in the understanding that you're freer than you knew. The door is open. It's always been open. You can stay or go based on authentic choice, not on assumed necessity. This recognition doesn't require you to change anything external. It just requires you to see clearly. The constraints you live under are more permeable than you thought. You've had more freedom all along. You just haven't been exercising it. Sleep now as a free person, aware that tomorrow you can walk through any open door you choose, or stay where you are by genuine choice, rather than imagined imprisonment. The freedom was always yours. Now you know it. In a garden temple, the monks kept a beautiful crane named Haku in a large bamboo enclosure. Haku had been brought to the temple as an injured chick, nursed back to health, and raised in the enclosure where he was safe from predators and provided with ample food. For 3 years, Haku lived comfortably in his bamboo home. The monks fed him daily, cleaned his space, and even spoke to him in gentle tones. He had everything a crane could need except freedom, though the monks assured themselves they were keeping him safe. One day, a traveling priest named Osho visited the temple and saw Haku in his enclosure. The priest noticed that Haku's wings had grown strong and full. He was clearly capable of flight, yet he never attempted to fly beyond the bamboo walls. even though portions of the enclosure were open to the sky. "Why doesn't your crane fly away?" Osho asked the monks. "He could if he wanted to," one monk replied. "We don't clip his wings." But he stays because he knows this is where his food comes, where he's safe, where he belongs. Osho watched Haku for several days. The crane would walk around his enclosure, occasionally stretching his wings, but never attempting actual flight. It was as if Haku had forgotten that flight was even possible, that his wings had any purpose beyond stretching. On his last day at the temple, Osho asked permission to enter Haku's enclosure. He approached the crane slowly, then suddenly clapped his hands and shouted, startling Haku into the air. The crane's wings opened instinctively, and for a moment, Haku was flying, truly flying, circling above the enclosure in surprise. But after only 2 circles, Haku landed back in his familiar corner, as if the brief flight had frightened rather than thrilled him. He settled back into his routine immediately, walking the same worn paths he always walked. The monks were angry. "You scared him! You could have hurt him!" "I showed him he could fly," Osho replied calmly, "but he chose to land." That choice tells me something important. Your crane is imprisoned not by bamboo walls, but by comfort. He could leave any time, but he won't, because the enclosure has become more familiar than freedom. He looked at the monks gathered around him. And before you judge Haku too harshly, ask yourselves, how are you different? How many of you are living in comfortable enclosures of your own making, never attempting to fly because the familiar is safer than the possible? One young monk, named Botan, was particularly struck by this question. He realized he had been at the temple for 5 years, had taken preliminary vows, but had never fully committed to the monastic life. He was comfortable in this in-between state, receiving the structure and security of monastery life without the full commitment it demanded. Like Haku, he had wings he never used. After Osho left, Botan couldn't stop thinking about the crane. He began to see Haku differently, not as a bird being kept safe, but as a bird being kept comfortable in a cage he could leave any time. And he began to see himself the same way. He started paying attention to all the ways the monastery had become his comfortable enclosure. He knew when every meal would come. He knew exactly what each day would bring. He had routines that felt safe, relationships that felt predictable, a life that felt controlled. And he realized this comfort was preventing him from attempting the flight that monastic life was actually meant to enable. The leap into full commitment, into genuine spiritual practice, into the risk and uncertainty that real transformation requires. "I've been living like Haku," Botan confessed to the abbot. "Safe and comfortable, but not really alive. Not really practicing, just walking the same familiar paths day after day." The abbot, who'd been troubled by Osho's words about the crane, nodded. "You're not alone." Many of us have made the monastery into a comfortable cage rather than a launching place. We've mistaken security for wisdom, routine for practice, comfort for peace. He gestured toward Haku's enclosure. The priest was right to startle the crane into flight, not to frighten him, but to remind him what his wings were for. Perhaps we all need to be startled sometimes, reminded that we have wings we're not using, capabilities we're not exercising, flights we're not attempting, because the ground feels safer. The monks began to look at their own lives with new eyes. They noticed patterns of comfortable avoidance, ways they stayed safely within self-imposed limits, flights they could attempt but didn't. The monastery, meant to be a place of transformation, had become for many a place of comfortable stagnation. Gradually, changes began to happen. Monks who had been avoiding difficult practices began to attempt them. Commitments that had been postponed were made. Risks that had seemed too frightening were taken. Not everyone changed. Some preferred the comfortable enclosure, but many discovered they had wings they had forgotten about. As for Haku, the monks began to encourage him to fly, taking him to open areas and gently startling him into the air. At first, he would fly only briefly before landing back in familiar territory, but eventually, his flights grew longer. One day, Haku flew beyond the temple grounds entirely and didn't return. The monks felt both loss and joy. They had loved having Haku, but they recognized that keeping him comfortable had been keeping him caged. Setting him free, truly free, not just free within limits, was the compassionate thing, even though it meant losing him. Botan, watching Haku disappear into the distance, felt inspired. If a crane can remember how to fly after 3 years of comfortable captivity, then surely I can remember what I came here to do. I've been in my bamboo enclosure long enough. He took his final vows that week, fully committing to monastic life. It was terrifying in a way his comfortable half-commitment had never been. But it was also exhilarating, like stretching wings he had forgotten he possessed. Years later, when Botan had become a teacher, he would often tell the story of Haku the crane. "We all build comfortable enclosures," he would say. "Relationships that feel safe but limit growth. Jobs that provide security but prevent exploration. Routines that feel comforting but cage us. The bamboo walls look like protection, but they're actually prevention, preventing us from discovering what we're capable of, from attempting flights we were made for." Students would ask, but how do we know when comfort has become a cage? When should we leave the enclosure? When you're walking the same paths day after day without growth, Botan would reply. When you've stopped even looking at the sky. When you've forgotten you have wings. When the thought of flying fills you with fear rather than excitement. These are signs that comfort has become captivity, that the safe enclosure has become a prison you don't recognize as a prison because it's comfortable. He would pause, then add, "The tragedy isn't being in the enclosure. The tragedy is forgetting you can leave, forgetting you were made for flight, forgetting that your wings have purpose beyond stretching." Haku lived 3 years in comfortable captivity before someone reminded him he could fly. How many years will you live in yours before you remember? Tonight, as you rest, you might consider your own bamboo enclosure. What comfortable cage have you built for yourself? What safe patterns have you established that prevent growth? What flights are you not attempting because staying grounded feels safer? You have wings. You've always had wings. The question isn't whether you're capable of flight. You are. The question is whether you've become so comfortable with the ground that you've forgotten that the sky is where you belong. Whether the bamboo enclosure feels so safe that you've stopped noticing it's still an enclosure. Rest tonight with this awareness. Tomorrow, you could fly. You could attempt something that terrifies you. You could leave the comfortable patterns and risk the unknown. You could stretch your wings, not just as exercise, but as preparation for actual flight. The cage isn't locked. It never was. You've just been comfortable enough that you forgot to try the door. Sleep now and dream of flying. Let some part of you remember what your wings are for. And when you wake, maybe, just maybe, you'll be ready to find out what happens when you actually use them. Step on the Zen path. A new lesson unfolds. Now we turn to a story about recognition, of self, of others, and of what truly matters. Listen carefully to the next story. In a mountain village famous for its textiles, there was a master weaver named Chio who created cloth of extraordinary beauty. Her patterns were intricate, her colors perfectly balanced, her technique flawless. People would travel for days to commission work from her loom, and her pieces hung in the homes of nobles throughout the province. Then, one winter morning, Chio woke to find her hands had stiffened with arthritis. The pain was intense, but worse was the loss of the fine motor control that her craft demanded. She could no longer work the shuttle with her usual precision. The delicate adjustments that created her signature patterns were now impossible. For a weaver, this seemed like a death sentence. Chio's entire identity, her life's work, her purpose, all depended on her hands. Now those hands betrayed her, refusing to do what she commanded. She sat before her loom for hours, weeping, unable to imagine a future without her craft. Days turned to weeks. The loom sat silent. Chio refused visitors, refused commissions, refused to even look at the beautiful threads that had once brought her such joy. Her apprentice, a young woman named Nao, came regularly, begging Chio to teach her, to at least pass on knowledge if she could no longer create. But Chio sent her away each time. "What's the point?" she would say. "Without my hands, I have nothing to teach. I am nothing." One day, Nao arrived with a request that Chio couldn't refuse. A small child from the village was sick, and his mother had asked if Chio might weave even a simple cloth for the child's comfort. "She doesn't expect your fine work," Nao said gently. "She just wants something made by you, even if it's rough. She believes your cloth has healing in it." Chio couldn't say no to a sick child, so she returned to her loom for the first time in months. Her stiff hands struggled with the shuttle. The tension was uneven. The pattern she attempted came out distorted. Everything her hands produced now was clumsy, imperfect, wrong. But she continued, driven by compassion for the child. She created a simple blanket, nothing like her former masterpieces. The weave was loose, the pattern irregular, the whole piece marked by the limitations of her arthritic hands. She wrapped it with shame, certain the mother would be disappointed. When Nao delivered the blanket, the mother held it and began to cry. "It's perfect," she said. "Tell Chio it's the most beautiful thing she's ever made." Nao brought this message back to Chio, who couldn't believe it. How could that rough, imperfect work be beautiful? "It's everything I spent my life learning not to create." The mother said she could feel the struggle in it, Nao reported. She said she could feel your hands fighting to create something despite the pain. She said it reminded her that beautiful things can emerge from difficulty, that limitation doesn't mean the end of creation. Her child is struggling too, and she said this cloth would remind him that struggle can still produce beauty. This response shook something loose in Chio's understanding. She had thought beauty required perfection, that her arthritic hands could only produce inferior work. But this mother had seen a different kind of beauty, the beauty of creation despite limitation, of persistence through difficulty, of love expressed through imperfect means. Chio returned to her loom with a new perspective. She stopped trying to create what her hands could no longer produce and started exploring what they could produce. The patterns that emerged were unlike anything she had made before. They were asymmetrical, organic, and marked by the randomness of her unpredictable hand movements. They told stories of struggle and adaptation, of beauty that included, rather than denied, imperfection. People noticed something profound in this new work. Her earlier pieces had been technically superior, but these new pieces touched something deeper. They were relatable in a way perfection never is. They spoke of being human, of limitations, of finding beauty not despite obstacles, but through them. "Your old work was impressive," one patron told her. "This new work is moving. I look at your perfect pieces and admire them. I look at these new pieces and feel understood." Chio began teaching again, but with a transformed philosophy. "I spent 30 years pursuing perfection," she would tell students. "I thought my value as a weaver came from my technical mastery. But arthritis stripped that away and showed me something more important. That beauty doesn't require perfection. That limitation can reveal new possibilities. That the work of imperfect hands can touch hearts in ways that perfect technique never could." She would show students her early work alongside her later work. "These first pieces show what skilled hands can do. These later pieces show what love can do with whatever hands you have. Which is more valuable?" The answer isn't obvious. Now, who had continued as her apprentice through all these changes, asked one day, "Do you wish you could have your old hands back? Do you miss being able to create perfectly?" Chio thought for a long time before answering. "I miss the ease of it," she said honestly. "I miss not feeling pain with every movement, but I don't miss who I was when perfection came easily." That Chio was skilled but narrow. She understood only one kind of beauty. This Chio, with her stiff, painful hands, understands more. The arthritis took my technical perfection, but it gave me depth I never had before. She held up her gnarled hands. "These hands taught me what my young, nimble hands never could, that obstacles refine what truly matters. When I could create anything, I created what was impressive. Now that I can only create with difficulty, I create what's true." The limitation stripped away everything superficial and left only what's essential. Years passed, and Chio's hands grew worse. Eventually, she could barely work the loom at all. But by then, her teaching had become as valued as her weaving once was. She taught people to see obstacles not as endings, but as refinements, not as barriers, but as editors that remove what's unnecessary and reveal what's essential. "Every limitation is a teacher," she would say. "It shows you what really matters by taking away what doesn't." My hands took away my technical mastery and revealed that mastery was never the point. The point was always connection, expression, and the creation of beauty that touches hearts. I can do that with arthritic hands. I just had to learn a different language of beauty. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider your own limitations, your own obstacles, your own arthritic hands. What has been taken from you that felt essential? What can you no longer do that once defined you? These losses aren't just subtractions, they're refinements, removing what's superficial to reveal what's essential. Your obstacles are teaching you something. They're stripping away the easy answers, the impressive exteriors, the technical perfections that never touched anyone's heart anyway. What remains, what you can still do despite your limitations, that's what truly matters. That's where your real beauty lives. Rest now in acceptance of your arthritic hands, your imperfect instruments, your limited capacities. They're not preventing beauty. They're refining it, teaching it, revealing it in forms you never would have discovered through ease and perfection. The weaver's silent loom eventually spoke with more power than her perfect one ever did. Your limitations will teach you the same truth if you let them. At the edge of a village stood a house whose small garden received almost no direct sunlight. Tall buildings on either side cast shadows that leave the garden in shade for all but an hour each day. The previous owners had tried repeatedly to grow sun-loving flowers and vegetables, but everything either died or grew weak and spindly, stretching desperately toward the brief sliver of light. When Yuki moved into the house, neighbors warned her about the garden. "Nothing grows there," they said. "The shade is too deep. Better to pave it over and use it for storage." But Yuki looked at the shaded space differently. "It's not that nothing can grow here," she said. "It's that sun-loving plants can't grow here. The garden isn't bad. It's just suited for different things than the previous owners were trying to grow." She began researching plants that thrived in shade, ferns that loved the dim moisture, hostas with broad leaves that caught what little light appeared, shade-loving flowers that bloomed in muted colors, but with delicate beauty. Instead of fighting the garden's nature, she worked with it. Within a year, Yuki's shaded garden was lush and beautiful. It didn't look like sunny gardens with their bright flowers and robust vegetables. It had a different aesthetic, subtle, cool, mysterious. The greens were deeper, the flowers were more delicate. The whole space had a quality of quiet richness that sun-blasted gardens never achieved. Neighbors who had declared the space hopeless came to see what Yuki had created. They were amazed, though some were still dismissive. "It's pretty," one neighbor said, "but it's not a real garden. Real gardens have tomatoes and sunflowers and bright colors. Your garden is just making the best of bad conditions." "Are it conditions bad?" Yuki asked. "Or just different conditions?" "These ferns and hostas are barely surviving. They're thriving. They're doing exactly what they evolved to do in exactly the kind of environment they need. The previous owners failed because they tried to grow sun plants in shade. I'm succeeding because I'm growing shade plants in shade." She touched a particularly lush fern. "This plant would die in full sun. It needs shade. For this fern, my garden isn't difficult conditions, it's ideal conditions. The mistake is measuring all gardens by sun garden standards and calling everything else deficient." A young woman named Hannah, who lived nearby, was struck by this perspective. Hannah had always felt like she was growing in the shade in difficult circumstances that made the kind of success others achieved impossible for her. She had health issues that limited her energy. She lived in poverty, which restricted her opportunities. She lacked the family support that others took for granted. Everyone told her she needed to overcome these limitations, to find more light, to transform her difficult conditions into easier ones. But what if, like Yuki's garden, she just needed to stop trying to grow like a sun plant and instead discover how to thrive as a shade plant? She came to talk with Yuki about this idea. "I feel like I'm always failing," Hana admitted, "because I can't achieve what healthy, wealthy people with family support achieve. I'm trying to grow tomatoes in shade, basically. But I don't know what the equivalent of shade plants would be for a human life." Yuki walked her through the garden, explaining her choices. "See how I chose plants that need less energy? That's like you choosing work that fits your energy levels rather than jobs that demand more than you can give. See how I selected plants that thrive in cool, moist conditions? That's like you finding strengths that develop specifically because of your limitations, not despite them." She pointed to a particularly beautiful shade flower. This would never survive in full sun. Its delicate petals would burn, but here, protected from harsh light, it blooms with a beauty that sun lovers can't achieve. Your limitations might protect you from certain kinds of harm while allowing you to develop qualities that people in easier conditions never develop. Hana began to reconsider her entire life. What if she stopped measuring herself by sun garden standards? What if she found shade garden ways to thrive? She had deep empathy, probably developed through her own suffering. She had patience, learned through chronic illness. She had creativity in making do with little, born from poverty. These weren't consolation prizes for failing at normal success. These were actual strengths, shade plant qualities that were valuable in themselves. She started making different choices. She took a job that paid less, but required less energy, allowing her to work sustainably rather than constantly burning out. She developed friendships with others who lived in shade, creating community with people who understood difficult circumstances. She stopped apologizing for needing things that others didn't need, recognizing that shade plants legitimately need different care than sun plants. Word spread about Yuki's garden and the perspective it represented. People who felt they were growing in difficult conditions began to see themselves differently. A man with learning disabilities stopped trying to compete in academic environments and found work that used his practical intelligence. A woman with anxiety stopped forcing herself into high-stress social situations and built a life that honored her need for quiet. A family with limited income stopped feeling inadequate for not achieving wealth and found richness in their strong relationships. The shade garden teaching, as people began to call it, spread beyond individuals to organizations. A school started creating shade garden programs for students who couldn't thrive in standard classroom environments. A business developed positions specifically designed for people with limitations that made traditional jobs difficult. A community center created spaces for people who needed accommodations that mainstream spaces didn't provide. Not everyone appreciated this perspective. Some critics said it encouraged people to accept limitations rather than overcoming them. "You're telling people to give up," they argued, "to accept that they can't thrive in normal conditions rather than working to change their circumstances." Yuki would answer these critics by walking them through her garden. "Look at these plants. Should they be working to become sun plants? Should they be trying to overcome their shade-thriving nature? Or should they be celebrated for being excellent at what they actually are? She would point to a struggling plant that needed more light. Sometimes you do need to change conditions. This plant is genuinely in the wrong place. It needs to be moved to a more light-filled place. But most of these plants, they're exactly where they should be, thriving in conditions that sun plants would call impossible. The question isn't whether to overcome all limitations. The question is whether your limitations are like shade for a shade plant, the right conditions for your actual nature, or like shade for a sun plant, wrong conditions that need to change. A teacher named Nobuo applied this to his classroom. He stopped trying to make all students thrive in the same way. He recognized that some students were sun plants who needed bright, fast-paced, competitive environments. Others were shade plants that needed quiet, slow, supportive conditions. Trying to make shade plant students compete in sun plant ways was as futile as trying to grow ferns in full sun. He created different pathways through his curriculum, different ways to demonstrate learning, and different environments within his classroom. And he found that students he had previously considered struggling were actually thriving. They just needed shade garden conditions to show what they could do. Years later, Yuki's garden became something of a pilgrimage site for people living in difficult circumstances. They would come to see that lushness was possible even in shade, that beauty didn't require ideal conditions, that thriving could look different from what sunny gardens showed. Yuki, now elderly, would sit in her garden talking with visitors. The hardest thing, she would tell them, is stopping comparing yourself to sun gardens. Stop measuring your lushness by their standards. Stop trying to be bright when your beauty is subtle. Once you accept that you're a shade garden, once you stop apologizing for it and start working with it, you discover possibilities you never knew existed. She would touch the ferns and hostas she had planted decades earlier, now mature and magnificent. These plants are barely surviving in bad conditions. They're thriving in ideal conditions for their nature. The shade isn't their obstacle, it's their element. And the same might be true for you. Tonight, as you rest, you might reconsider the shade you're growing in. The difficult conditions you've been taught to see as obstacles might actually be the right environment for who you actually are. Not who you think you should be, not who sun gardens demand, but who you actually are. Stop trying to grow sun plants in shade. Stop measuring yourself by standards designed for different conditions. Start asking, what does thriving look like for a shade plant? What can I grow that loves these exact conditions? What beauty can emerge specifically because of these limitations, not despite them? Rest now in your shade garden. Let yourself be a fern, a hosta, a delicate shade flower. Stop burning yourself trying to bloom in full sun. Sink into the cool moisture of your actual conditions and discover what wants to grow there. Shade isn't a deficiency. It's just a different light. And different light creates different beauty. Trust that yours is worth growing. As our exploration of Zen Buddhism deepens, let us listen to a story that reveals how true worth is often overlooked. Here starts the next story. There was a fisherman named Sato who lived in a coastal village where fishing was both a livelihood and a tradition. Every morning, the fishermen would go out in their boats, and every evening they would return with their catches. The measure of a good fisherman was simple. How many fish did you catch? Sato had been fishing since childhood. He knew the waters, understood the tides, and could read the weather. But despite all his skill and knowledge, he had a problem that plagued him. At least once a week, sometimes more, he would return with an empty net. Not a small catch, not a few fish, empty. Other fishermen would return with boats full of fish, and Sato would be pulling up nets that contained nothing but seaweed and water. It was humiliating. People in the village began to see him as unlucky, perhaps even incompetent, despite his years of experience. Sato's wife, Hana, watched her husband grow increasingly frustrated and ashamed. He would come home from these empty net days silent and dejected, barely eating, questioning his worth as a fisherman and as a provider. One day, after a particularly discouraging week where Sato had returned empty-handed 3 times, Hana said something unexpected. "I'm glad you caught no fish today." Sato looked at her in disbelief. "How can you say that?" "We need the income. The other fishermen are successful. I'm failing." "Come with me," Hana said, taking his hand. She led him to the small shrine at the edge of their property, where they would leave offerings for good fortune. On the offering plate were several small items: 3 unusual shells, a piece of interesting driftwood, a small colored stone. "Where did these come from?" Sato asked. "From your empty nets," Hana replied. "On the days when you caught no fish, you brought home these things instead. You were so focused on what you didn't catch that you never looked at what you did bring back." She picked up one of the shells. "This one you brought back 2 weeks ago. I'd never seen a shell like this before. I showed it to the teacher at the school, and she used it to teach the children about sea life. Those children learned something beautiful from your empty net." She picked up the driftwood. "This piece is so interesting in shape that the temple carver asked if he could use it for a small Buddha statue. Your failure brought something that will become sacred art." Sato looked at these objects with new eyes. He had indeed pulled them from his nets on empty days, but he had seen them as worthless, just debris that mocked him by taking the place of fish. "But we can't eat shells and driftwood," he protested. "We need fish to sell." "We need some fish," Hana agreed, "and you catch enough on your successful days. But these empty net days bring other things, things with value that can't be measured in money, and they bring something else too." "What?" "They bring your presence home to me," she said quietly. "On days when you catch many fish, you come home exhausted but proud, and you spend the evening repairing nets and equipment, already planning the next day. But on empty net days, you sit with me, you talk with me. You're actually here, not already out on the boat in your mind. I know this sounds selfish, but I treasure those days when you come home empty-handed, because I get all of you, not just your tired body." This perspective shook something loose in Sato. He had been measuring his worth entirely by fish caught, seeing empty nets as pure failure. But Hana was showing him that those apparently failed days brought other things, things he had been too ashamed to notice. A few days later, on another empty net morning, Sato pulled up his nets and found not fish, but a tangled mass of seaweed. His first reaction was the familiar frustration. But then he remembered Hana's words and looked at the seaweed more carefully. It was a type he had seen farmers collecting for fertilizer. Instead of throwing it back in disgust, he kept it. When he returned to shore, he asked one of the farmers if the seaweed was useful. The farmer's eyes lit up. "This is exactly what I need for my fields. Would you sell it to me?" The money from the seaweed wasn't as much as fish would have brought, but it was something. And more than that, Sato realized he had just turned a failed fishing day into a successful day by changing what he was looking for. He began experimenting with this perspective. On days when fish weren't biting, instead of stubbornly keeping his nets in the water, he would pay attention to what else was happening. He noticed patterns in bird behavior that told him where fish might be on better days. He observed current changes that helped him understand seasonal movements. He collected things that others might value: certain shells, seaweed, and interesting stones. But perhaps most importantly, he stopped defining himself solely by the fish caught. He began to see himself not just as a fisherman, but as someone who harvested from the sea. Sometimes the harvest was fish. Sometimes it was knowledge. Sometimes it was presence of his wife. Sometimes it was objects that others valued for reasons he had never considered. Other fishermen noticed the change in Sato. He no longer came to shore on empty net days looking defeated and ashamed. He seemed interested in what he had found, curious about the day's experience even if it hadn't been conventionally successful. One young fisherman who was struggling with his own inconsistent catches asked Sato, "How do you stay positive when you fail?" "I stopped calling it failure," Sato replied. "Some days I catch fish. Some days I catch other things. Some days I catch nothing but return with more understanding of the sea. Every day has value if I'm looking for value rather than defining success narrowly." He showed the young fisherman his collection of interesting finds from supposedly failed days. "If I had been catching fish every single day, I never would have noticed any of this. My failure to catch fish opened my attention to everything else. Now I know the sea that the most successful fishermen don't have, because their constant success never forced them to look at anything else." A Zen monk who was visiting the village heard about Sato's philosophy and came to talk with him. "You've learned something that many people never learn," the monk said. "You've learned that failure and success are not opposites but neighbors. Sometimes what looks like failure is actually success, in a form you didn't recognize. Sometimes getting what you wanted would have prevented you from discovering something more valuable." Sato nodded. "For years, I prayed to the sea gods to never return with empty nets. Now I understand that the empty nets were answering a different prayer, one I didn't know I was making. They were teaching me to see value beyond the obvious, to measure worth by more than one standard, to be present to what is, rather than always grasping for what should be." The monk smiled. "The empty net is a great teacher. Because it's empty, it can receive anything. Because it failed to catch what you were seeking, it caught things you weren't looking for. Sometimes the best gifts come through the door of apparent failure." Years later, when Sato was old and teaching his grandson to fish, the boy became discouraged after several days with small catches. "Grandfather, I'm not good at this. I keep failing." Sato smiled and showed his grandson the collection he had accumulated over the years. Unusual shells, interesting stones, pieces of driftwood, observations written down about sea and weather, and recipes for using seaweed. All of these came from days when I caught few or no fish, If every day had been successful by the measure I was using, then I would never have discovered any of this. Sometimes the empty net brings exactly what you need, just not what you wanted. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder. Don't fear failure. Don't rush to judge whether a day was successful or not. Some of my best days looked like my worst days at the time. The measure of success that seems obvious often isn't the most important one. Keep your eyes open for what the sea is actually offering you, not just what you came looking for. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider your own empty nets. What apparent failures in your life might be successes, wearing different clothes? What disappointments might have brought gifts you were too focused on the disappointment to notice? What seemed like coming up empty might have actually been receiving something more valuable than what you were seeking. You don't need to catch fish every day. You don't need to succeed by conventional measures every time. Sometimes the empty net is exactly what you need, bringing lessons and gifts that success would have prevented you from receiving. Sometimes failure is just success that requires better eyes to see it. Rest now in acceptance of all your empty nets, all your apparent failures, all the times you came up short by the measures you were using. These weren't wastes. They were opportunities to learn different measures, to discover unexpected value, to receive what you weren't looking for but desperately needed. The empty net isn't a tragedy, it's a teaching. Let it teach you tonight. As you rest in the emptiness, that's actually fullness waiting to be recognized. Continuing along the path of Zen insight, we pause now to hear a teaching about perception and hidden value. Listen carefully to the next story. In a village where strong winds frequently blew down from the mountains, there was a grove of trees that included many different species. There were tall, rigid pines that stood straight and proud. There were sturdy oaks with thick trunks and strong branches. And among these impressive trees, there grew a single weeping willow, whose branches hung down gracefully, swaying with every breeze. A young carpenter named Riku would come to this grove to select wood for his work. He admired the strong, straight pines and the solid oaks. These were trees that stood firm against the wind, that didn't bend or yield, that maintained their position no matter what the weather came. This, Riku thought, was what strength looked like. The weeping willow he barely noticed, and when he did, he pitied it. Its branches drooped instead of reaching proudly skyward. It swayed and bent with every wind. It seemed weak, yielding, almost pathetic compared to the strong trees around it. Then one year, a great storm came. The wind howled down from the mountains with unprecedented force. The rain fell in sheets. Lightning split the sky. For 3 days and 3 nights, the storm raged. When it finally passed, Riku went to the grove to see what wood might be available from fallen trees. What he found shocked him. The strong pines, so tall and proud, had snapped like twigs. Their rigid trunks had broken under the force of the wind. The sturdy oaks had been uprooted, their strong but inflexible branches torn away. All across the grove lay the wreckage of trees that had stood firm, refused to yield, and had been destroyed for their rigidity. But the weeping willow still stood. Its branches, which had seemed so weak because they bent and swayed, had flexed with the wind rather than breaking against it. The tree that had appeared most fragile had survived when all the apparently strong trees had fallen. Riku sat beside the willow, looking at the destruction around it, trying to understand what he was seeing. Everything he thought he knew about strength was being challenged. The rig had broken. The yielding had survived. An old Buddhist nun named Kei was walking through the grove, surveying the damage from the storm. She saw Riku sitting in confusion and joined him. "The storm taught you something," she said. "I don't understand," Riku replied. "The strong trees broke. The weak ones survived. How can that be?" "You're confusing rigidity with strength," Kei said gently, "and flexibility with weakness. These are not the same things." She touched one of the willow's drooping branches. "This tree looks weak because it bends, but bending is what saved it." The rigid trees fought against the wind, trying to stand firm, refusing to yield. And the wind broke them. The willow didn't fight. It bent with the wind, yielded to forces it couldn't resist, and in that yielding, found the strength to survive. Riku listened carefully as Kei continued. "There's a principle in martial arts called Ju, which means gentleness or flexibility. The idea is that you don't meet force with force. You don't try to be harder than what's hitting you. Instead, you yield. You move with the energy coming at you. You redirect it rather than blocking it. This isn't a weakness. It's a different kind of strength." She gestured to the broken pines. These trees were strong in one way, but their strength was brittle. They could stand firm against normal winds, but when a force greater than their resistance came, they broke. The willow's strength is different. It has no brittleness because it has no rigidity. It can't break because it never stops bending. Over the following weeks, Riku began to see this principle everywhere. He watched how water, soft and yielding, could wear away stone over time. He noticed how the most rigid people in the village were often the most fragile when things didn't go their way. He observed how the people who could adapt and bend were often the ones who survived life's storms most intact. He changed his approach to carpentry. Instead of always seeking the hardest, most rigid woods, he began to appreciate woods with some flexibility, some give. He learned to work with the wood's natural tendencies rather than trying to force it into shapes it didn't want to take. His furniture became known for being both strong and graceful, able to bear weight while having a quality of flow and ease. But the deeper lesson was about how he lived his own life. Riku had always prided himself on being firm in his opinions, rigid in his principles, unwavering in his positions. He thought this made him strong, but he began to realize it made him brittle. When his wife suggested a different approach to something, his first instinct had always been to resist, to stand firm in his original idea. Now he began to consider, what if yielding wasn't losing? What if listening and adjusting weren't weaknesses but wisdom? When a client wanted changes to a piece he was building, instead of rigidly defending his design, he would flex, adapt, and incorporate their ideas. Often, the result was better than what he had planned. His yielding led to better outcomes than his resistance ever had. When life didn't go according to his plans, instead of fighting against reality, insisting things should be different, he began to bend with what was happening, to adapt, to find ways to work with circumstances rather than against them. A young man from the village came to Riku seeking advice. "Everyone tells me I need to be strong, to stand firm, to never back down, but I don't feel strong when I do that. I feel brittle, like I'm about to break." Riku took him to see the weeping willow. The tree had grown even larger in the years since the storm, its graceful branches now spreading wide. "This tree survived a storm that destroyed every tree around it," Riku said, "not because it was harder or more rigid, but because it knew how to yield. Look at how it moves with this breeze. It doesn't fight the wind, it dances with it." He touched one of the branches, pulling it down and watching it spring back when he released it. True strength includes flexibility. The ability to bend without breaking, to yield without collapsing, to adapt without losing your essential nature. The willow yields, but it doesn't uproot. It bends, but it doesn't break. This is a strength that lasts. The young man asked, "But how do you know when to stand firm and when to bend? Don't some things require us to be rigid, to not yield?" "Yes," Riku acknowledged. "The willow has strong roots. It's flexible in its branches, but grounded in its foundation. The key is knowing what's essential and what's not. Your core values, your true nature, these are like the willow's roots. They ground you, but your opinions, your plans, your preferences, these can be like the branches. They can bend, adapt, yield without threatening who you fundamentally are." He gestured to where the oak and pine had once stood. These trees tried to keep everything rigid. Every branch, every position. They couldn't distinguish between what was essential to hold firm and what could be released. So when the great test came, they lost everything. The willow knew what to hold and what to release. It held its roots and released its branches to the wind. That's wisdom. Years later, the weeping willow became a teaching symbol in the village. Parents would bring children to see it, telling them the story of the great storm. Teachers would use it to illustrate the difference between rigidity and strength. Couples in conflict would sit beneath it, reminding themselves that yielding to each other wasn't losing, but creating a relationship that could weather storms. Riku, now an old man, would still visit the willow regularly. He had learned his lesson deeply. His life had brought many storms, many winds that could have broken him if he had stood rigid against them. But he had learned to bend, to yield, to move with forces he couldn't resist. And like the willow, he had survived, even thrived, not despite his flexibility, but because of it. One day, a master carpenter from the capital came to the village seeking Riku's advice. "I'm known for my rigid standards, my unwillingness to compromise," the master said. "But I'm miserable, and my relationships are all strained. People say I should learn from you." Riku took him to the willow. "What do you see?" "A tree with drooping branches. It looks weak." "It's the only tree that survived the great storm. Everything that looked strong broke. This tree that looks weak stood firm, not through rigidity, but through flexibility." He let this sink in before continuing. "Your rigidity feels like strength because you're in control, imposing your will, but it's actually brittleness. When life brings forces stronger than your will, you'll break. Learn to bend. Learn to yield. Not in your core principles, but in your attachment to having everything your way. True mastery includes knowing when to stand firm and when to flow. Tonight, as you rest, notice where you're holding rigid. What positions are you gripping too tightly? What plans are you clinging to that life is asking you to release? Where might you need to be more like the weeping willow, yielding to forces you can't control, bending so you don't break? Strength isn't always about standing firm. Sometimes it's about flowing with what comes. Sometimes the greatest power is in yielding, adapting, and moving with life rather than against it. The willow survives because it doesn't fight battles it can't win. It bends, knowing that bending isn't breaking. Let yourself bend tonight. Let yourself yield to rest, to uncertainty, to whatever is. Don't be rigid in your expectations of how this should feel or what should happen. Flow like the willow's branches in the wind, trusting that your roots are strong enough to hold you even as you move with forces beyond your control. Yielding isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And tonight, it's the way to deep rest. As we drift deeper into the still waters of Zen, a quiet teaching begins to rise, one that speaks of clarity and of value not always seen. Listen gently now. The next story begins. There was a master calligrapher named Yukiko who had devoted her entire life to the art of beautiful writing. For 60 years, she had practiced daily, creating works that were displayed in temples and palaces throughout the land. Her characters were considered the finest of her generation. But as she grew old, her hands began to shake. The tremor was slight at first, barely noticeable, but gradually it worsened, until she could no longer create the smooth flowing lines that had been her signature. The characters she wrote became jagged, uneven, broken by the involuntary movements of her aging hands. Yukiko was devastated. Calligraphy was not just her work, it was her identity, her life's purpose. She had defined herself through her art for 60 years. Now, unable to produce the quality of work she had maintained for decades, she felt her life was over. If she couldn't create beautiful calligraphy, what was she? She stopped taking commissions. She stopped teaching students. She sat in her studio, staring at blank paper, unable to bring herself to create imperfect work. Each day felt like waiting for death, as if her life had ended, even though her body continued. One day, a young calligrapher named Kenji came to visit her. He had studied her work and wanted to meet her before she died, as he had heard she was no longer creating. "Master Yukiko," he said, bowing deeply, "please, will you show me how you create such beautiful work?" "I can't," Yukiko replied bitterly. "My hands shake. I can no longer do what I once did. My time is over." "Show me anyway," Kenji persisted. "Show me what you do now, even if it's not what you once did." Reluctantly, to satisfy this persistent young man, Yukiko took up her brush. Her hand trembled as she moved it across the paper. The line broke and wavered. The character she was forming looked nothing like the smooth, perfect characters she had created for 60 years. But Kenji was staring at it with wonder. "This is extraordinary." "It's broken," Yukiko said. "It's everything I spent my life learning not to do." "It's alive," Kenji replied. "Your old work was perfect, but this has something your perfect work didn't have. It has a vulnerability. It has humanity. It shows the reality of the hand that made it. the tremor that comes with age, the imperfection that comes with being human. It's no less beautiful, it's beautiful in a different way. He pointed to specific places where the line broke. See how this break creates a pause, a breath? See how this wobble adds energy, movement. You couldn't create these effects intentionally. They come from not being able to control everything, from allowing the reality of your condition to show. Yukiko looked at her shaky calligraphy with new eyes. She had been seeing only what it wasn't: smooth, controlled, perfect. She hadn't been seeing what it was: authentic, immediate, marked by the truth of her aging body. "You're saying my shaking hands aren't ending my art?" she asked. "They're changing it. They're revealing a new possibility," Kenji said. "You've mastered perfection. You spent 60 years learning complete control. Now you're learning something else. How to create beauty without control. How to let your limitations become part of your art rather than obstacles to it. This isn't an ending. This is a beginning." Over the following months, Yukiko began to explore what Kenji had called a beginning. She stopped trying to fight against her tremor and started working with it. She let the shakiness show, let the broken lines be part of the aesthetic. Let her aging hands tell their own truth. The work she created was unlike anything she had done before. It had a raw quality, an honesty, a profound beauty that came from acceptance rather than mastery. People who saw it were moved in ways they couldn't quite explain. It touched something in them that perfect calligraphy never had. "Your new work feels more human," one viewer said. "The perfection was impressive, but this is relatable. This shows struggle and acceptance. This shows life as it actually is, not as we wish it to be." Other aging artists heard about Yukiko's transformation and came to see her. They too had been treating their declining abilities as endings, as tragedies that marked the end of their creative lives. Yukiko showed them something different. "What you call an ending is just a transition," she told a painter whose eyesight was failing. "You've lost what you had, yes, but loss creates space for something new. If you spend all your time mourning what's gone, you'll never discover what's trying to arrive." She showed them her shaky calligraphy. "These tremors would have horrified me 5 years ago. I would have hidden this work in shame. But I've learned that every ending contains a beginning. My hands' steady control had to end before I could begin learning to create beauty from their unsteady truth." A sculptor whose arthritis had made detailed work impossible asked, "But how do you accept the loss? How do you stop grieving what you can no longer do?" "I still grieve it sometimes," Yukiko admitted. "I still miss the feeling of complete control, the satisfaction of executing exactly what I envisioned. But I've discovered something. The part of me that created perfect calligraphy was actually quite limited. It could only create what I consciously intended. Now, with my shaking hands, I create things I never could have planned. The imperfection introduces an element beyond my control, and that element often produces more interesting results than my intentions ever did." She held up a piece of her new work. "See this character? I intended it to look one way. My tremor made it look another way. And the way it actually looks is more compelling than what I planned. The beginning I'm in now includes accident, chance, collaboration with my body's wisdom, rather than domination of it. Kenji, who continued to visit Yukiko regularly, said, "You've become a better artist by becoming worse at control. Your mastery now includes accepting what you can't master. That's a higher skill than perfect technique ever was." Yukiko nodded. "When I had complete control, I could only create versions of what I already knew. Now, with partial control, I'm discovering things I didn't know were possible. The ending of my old art was the beginning of art I couldn't have created any other way." A Zen master who collected calligraphy commissioned a piece from Yukiko. When she delivered it, with all its shaky lines and broken strokes, he hung it in his meditation hall's place of honor. "This shows the essence of Zen," he told his students. "Perfection is static, fixed, dead. This work is dynamic, alive, accepting of change and impermanence." The master's tremor isn't a flaw in the work. It's the work teaching its deepest truth. That beauty includes imperfection. The endings contain beginnings. That loss creates space for discovery. Yukiko lived another 15 years, creating what many considered her finest work during this period. Critics called her late style revolutionary, noting how it had influenced a generation of younger artists to embrace imperfection and vulnerability in their work. When she finally died at 85, still creating tremor-marked calligraphy to the end, her students gathered to remember her. They spoke of her two periods, the 60 years of perfect control and the 15 years of acknowledged tremor. "Which period was greater?" a young student asked. An older student replied, "She was always great." But she became wise only in her second period, when she learned that endings contain beginnings. When she discovered that what you lose forces you to find what you didn't know was there. When she understood that every door that closes reveals another door you weren't seeing before. Tonight, as you rest, what endings are you mourning? What losses are you treating as pure conclusions with nothing beyond them? What abilities, relationships, or circumstances have ended that you're grieving, as if ending means death rather than transition? Every ending contains a beginning you can't see yet. The closing of one possibility opens others that couldn't have opened if the first possibility had continued. Your losses aren't just subtractions. They're also additions of space, of new potential, of directions you couldn't have gone while the old way remained available. What's ending in you right now isn't your conclusion, it's your transition. Something is completing, so something else can begin. The tremor that seems to be ruining your perfect lines is actually creating new kinds of beauty you couldn't have achieved through control alone. Rest now in acceptance of endings as beginnings in disguise. What's leaving is making room. What's breaking is revealing. What's ending is beginning, just not in ways you can recognize yet. Trust the ending. It knows what it's doing. Every conclusion contains a hidden opening, and you're moving toward it even as you mourn what's closing behind you. Sleep now in the space between ending and beginning, knowing that this space itself is fertile ground where something unexpected and beautiful is already starting to grow. With each breath, we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen, where the smallest stone may hold the greatest truth. Here starts the next story. In a village garden, there lived a harmless snake that ate insects and kept the vegetable patch healthy. The gardener, an old man named Hideaki, appreciated the snake and would nod to it when he saw it sunning itself on stones or moving slowly through the rows of vegetables. The snake was small, no thicker than Hideaki's thumb, with gentle eyes and a pattern of brown and green scales that helped it blend with the garden soil. It had lived in the garden for several years, and Hideaki had watched it grow from a tiny hatchling to its current modest size. It was a completely harmless species, one that ate only insects and small slugs, never anything larger. The snake wanted nothing to do with humans and would quickly slither away if anyone approached too closely. But Hideaki's grandson, a boy named Kyo, who was 8 years old, was terrified of the snake. He had never been bitten, never been threatened, never had any negative encounter with it at all. But he had heard stories from other children about snakes being dangerous. His friend's older brother had told elaborate tales about venomous snakes that could kill a person with one bite. Another child had described snakes as evil creatures that attacked without warning. So every time Kyo caught a glimpse of the garden snake, he would run away screaming. His heart would race. His breath would come short and fast. His whole body would flood with terror. The sight of that small, harmless creature would send him into complete panic. Hideaki tried many times to reason with his grandson. "Kyo, this snake is harmless. See how small it is. Look at its gentle movements. It eats only insects. It helps our garden by keeping pests away. It wants nothing to do with humans. It's more afraid of you than you are of it." But Kyo wouldn't listen. His fear was too great, too consuming. The rational words his grandfather spoke couldn't penetrate the wall of terror that the very idea of the snake created in his mind. Logic had no power over the fear that gripped him. "But snakes are dangerous," Kyo would insist. "Everyone knows that. They bite people. They're scary. I don't want to go in the garden anymore." Hideaki was concerned. The boy's fear was keeping him from enjoying the garden, from helping with the vegetables, from the simple pleasure of being outdoors. The fear was limiting his life in ways that had nothing to do with actual danger. One late afternoon, Kyo was alone in the garden, sent by his mother to pick some tomatoes for dinner. He was moving carefully, nervously, constantly scanning the ground for any sign of the snake. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden path. Then he saw it. Something moving on the ground ahead of him. The shape was long and sinuous, definitely a snake. And this one was enormous, far larger than the small garden snake he had seen before. It must be a different snake, a dangerous one. The creature was at least as thick as his arm, maybe 6 or 7 feet long, moving slowly across the path. Terror seized Kyo completely. His legs locked. His breath stopped. His heart hammered so hard he could hear it in his ears. He couldn't scream, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at this enormous serpent that was right in his path, blocking his way back to the house. The snake moved with a sinuous, menacing motion. Its body seemed to pulse and writhe. Kyo could see every detail of its threatening form, the dark color, the massive size, the way it seemed to be looking right at him, even though he couldn't see its head clearly. He stood there frozen, convinced he was about to be attacked, about to be bitten by this monster that had invaded his grandfather's garden. Minutes passed like hours. The snake continued its slow movement across the path, and Kyo remained paralyzed, watching it, unable to run or call for help. Finally, his grandfather came out of the house, having noticed that Kyo had been gone too long for such a simple errand. He found his grandson standing rigid with fear in the middle of the garden path, staring at the ground with eyes wide and face pale. "Kyo!" "What's wrong?" Hideaki called out, hurrying toward the boy. "A giant snake!" Kyo gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Right there! Look how huge it is! Grandfather, be careful!" Hideaki looked where his grandson was pointing. He saw the small garden snake, the same one that had lived there for years, sunning itself on the path, as it often did in the late afternoon. It was no bigger than it had ever been, perhaps 8 inches long, completely harmless. And nearby, stretching across the path in the low-angled light of the setting sun, he saw the snake's shadow. The shadow was indeed enormous, at least 6 feet long and thick, cast long and dark by the horizontal rays of the sun. The shadow looked menacing, serpentine, threatening. But it was just a shadow. Hideaki understood immediately what had happened. His grandson had seen the shadow and thought it was the snake, or thought it was a different, much larger snake. The boy's fear had locked onto the shadow and convinced him that he was seeing a genuine threat. "Kyo," Hideaki said gently, "come here. Come stand next to me." But Kyo couldn't move. "I can't. The snake is in the way. It's huge, grandfather. It's dangerous." "Trust me," Hideaki said, his voice calm and steady. "Take my hand. I promise you're safe." Slowly, with trembling steps, Kyo moved toward his grandfather, keeping his eyes on the enormous snake the entire time, certain it would strike at any moment. Hideaki took his grandson's hand and led him closer to where the small garden snake lay on the path. As they approached, something remarkable happened. The shadow shortened. The closer they got, the smaller the shadow became. By the time they stood right next to the actual snake, which quickly slithered away into the vegetables, startled by their approach, the shadow was appropriately small, no more threatening than the creature that cast it. Kyo stared at where the snake had been, then at where its shadow had stretched across the path. His breathing was still rapid, his heart still pounding, but confusion was beginning to replace terror. "The shadow," he whispered. I thought the shadow was the snake, or a different snake, a huge one." "I know," Hideaki said, kneeling down beside his grandson. "Come, let me show you something." He picked up a stick from the ground, about the same size as the garden snake. In the low afternoon sun, he held it at different angles, casting its shadow on the path. When he held it close to the ground, the shadow was small. But when he held it higher, angled toward the sun, the shadow grew enormous, stretching across the entire path. "See?" Hideaki said. "Any small thing can cast a large shadow under the right conditions. The shadow tells you nothing about the actual size or danger of the thing. It just tells you about the light and the angle and your position relative to it." Kyo watched, fascinated despite his lingering fear, as his grandfather made the stick's shadow grow and shrink, made it look threatening or harmless just by changing the angle. "The snake didn't change," Hideaki continued. "It was always small and harmless. But the shadow changed based on the light. and you saw the shadow and thought it was showing you the truth about the snake. But shadows can lie, or rather, shadows can exaggerate. They can make something small look huge, something harmless look dangerous. He set down the stick and took both of Kyo's hands. This is what fear does, grandson. Fear is like that low sun. It casts everything in shadow, making it look bigger and more dangerous than it actually is. The snake didn't change. Your perception of it changed based on angle, light, and most importantly, based on your expectation of danger. Over the following days, Hideaki worked with Kyo to help him understand not just the snake's shadow, but the nature of fear itself. He showed him how fear distorts perception, how it takes small threats and makes them seem enormous, how it turns harmless things into monsters. They did experiments together. In the late afternoon, when the sun was low, they would put various objects on the path and observe their shadows. A small toy mouse cast a shadow that looked like a large rat. A thin branch cast a shadow that looked like a serpent. A butterfly landing on a stone cast a shadow that seemed to flutter and pulse menacingly. Everything looks more threatening in shadow, Hideaki explained. And fear puts everything in shadow. When you're afraid, your mind sees threats everywhere. It exaggerates the size of dangers. It interprets ambiguous things as dangerous. It casts everything in the worst possible light, just like this low sun casts everything in exaggerated shadow. Kyo was beginning to understand. So when I'm afraid, I see shadows instead of real things. Exactly, his grandfather said. The fear came first, from the stories you heard, from the ideas you had about snakes being dangerous. Then, because you were already afraid, when you saw something that could be a snake, your fear made it look as threatening as possible. The shadow confirmed what you already feared. But it wasn't showing you reality, it was showing you your fear. They began a daily practice. Each afternoon, when the shadows were long, Kyo would go into the garden with his grandfather. They would look for the snake, and when they found it, they would observe both the snake and its shadow. Kyo would practice seeing them as separate things. The actual snake, small and harmless, and the shadow, which could be large or small depending on the light and angle. Slowly, over weeks, Kyo's fear began to diminish. He learned to check his first perception. When something looked threatening, he would ask himself, am I seeing the thing itself, or am I seeing its shadow? Am I responding to actual danger, or to fear's distortion of reality? One day, Kyo was in the garden alone when he saw the snake. His first impulse was still fear, that instant clench of his heart, that flash of terror. But now, he had tools to work with that fear. He stopped, took a breath, and looked more carefully. The snake was small, as it had always been. It was moving slowly through the lettuce, eating small insects. Its shadow in the bright midday sun was tiny and non-threatening. There was nothing here to fear. The actual snake was harmless. The shadow his fear had been casting was the real threat. Kyo didn't run. He watched the snake for several minutes, observing its gentle movements, the way it went about its business without any attention to him. He felt his fear dissolving, replaced by curiosity, and even a kind of appreciation. This creature was part of the garden's ecosystem, helpful and harmless. When he told his grandfather about this encounter, Hideaki smiled with deep satisfaction. "You've learned something that will serve you far beyond this garden," he said. "You've learned to distinguish between actual threats and the shadows that fear casts. Most of what frightens us in life is shadows, not substance." As Kyo grew older, he found this lesson applied to many areas of his life. When he was worried about starting at a new school, he recognized that his fear was casting shadows, making the unknown seem more threatening than it actually was. When he was anxious about speaking in front of his class, he understood that his imagination was creating enormous shadows of embarrassment and failure that were far larger than any actual consequence. He learned to ask himself the questions his grandfather had taught him. What is the actual thing I'm afraid of? How big is it really? And how much of what I'm seeing is the shadow cast by my own fear? Years later, when Kyo was a young man, he returned to his grandfather's garden. The old snake had long since died, but its descendants still lived there, keeping the garden healthy. Kyo could watch them without fear, even appreciate their elegant movements and their important role in the garden's balance. A neighbor's child was visiting, a little girl who was terrified of the snakes. She screamed when she saw one, just as Kyo had done years before. And Kyo found himself repeating his grandfather's lesson, showing her how the afternoon sun cast long shadows, demonstrating how fear makes small things look huge. "The shadow is not the thing," he told her, using the same words his grandfather had used with him. "Your fear shows you shadows and tells you they're real. But if you look more carefully, if you change your angle, if you step closer, you'll see the actual thing is much smaller than its shadow suggests." He showed her the small snake, harmless and gentle, and then its exaggerated shadow in the late afternoon light. He helped her understand that she had been responding to the shadow of her own fear, not to any actual danger. Hideaki, now very old, watched this teaching being passed down and felt deep satisfaction. This was wisdom that could transform a life. The understanding that fear distorts perception, that we so often respond to shadows rather than reality, that most of what terrifies us is an exaggeration created by our own minds. One evening, Hideaki and Kyo sat together in the garden as the sun set, casting long shadows across everything. "You know," Hideaki said, "I've been thinking about this teaching we've shared, about snakes and shadows. It goes even deeper than I first realized." "How so?" Kyo asked. "Well, we talk about how fear creates shadows that make things look bigger than they are. But there's another side to it. Sometimes we need to see our own shadows, the parts of ourselves we're afraid of or ashamed of. We spend so much energy trying to hide our shadows, pretending they don't exist, that we never really look at them. And anything we refuse to look at has power over us." He pointed to their own shadows, stretched long in the setting sun. "Your shadow is part of you. You can't separate from it, but it's not you. It's just the outline you cast, the space you block from the light. The same is true of our inner shadows, our fears and flaws, and the parts of ourselves we don't want to acknowledge. They're part of us, but they're not all of us, and they only look monstrous when we refuse to look at them directly." Kyo thought about this. So the lesson works both ways? Don't be afraid of shadows outside you because they're not as dangerous as they look. But also, don't be afraid of shadows inside you because they're just aspects of yourself, not monsters. Exactly, Hideaki said. Fear makes everything look worse than it is, whether it's a snake in the garden or a flaw in your own character. The solution is the same. Look directly at the thing itself, not at the shadow your fear is casting. When you look directly, with courage and honesty, you almost always find that the reality is more manageable than the shadow suggested. As night fell and the shadows merged into general darkness, Kyo reflected on all he had learned from one small garden snake and its shadow. The lesson had grown and deepened over the years, revealing new layers of meaning. What had started as a child's fear of a harmless creature had become a profound understanding about the nature of fear itself, about perception and reality, about how our minds create the very threats we're most afraid of. The garden snake, living its simple life among the vegetables, had been an unlikely teacher. But then Kyo had learned the best teachers often come in unexpected forms. Sometimes wisdom arrives not through grand revelations, but through small moments of noticing, through paying attention to shadows and light, through an old grandfather's patient guidance, and a child's eventual willingness to look more closely at what he feared. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider what shadows you've been seeing. What fears in your life are casting exaggerated shadows, making things seem more threatening than they actually are? What worries have you been responding to as if they were huge and dangerous, when they might be quite small if you looked at them directly? Fear has a way of taking the unknown, the uncertain, the potentially difficult, and casting it in the worst possible light. Every ambiguous situation becomes threatening. Every challenge looks insurmountable. Every risk seems catastrophic. But these are shadows, distortions created by the angle of your perception and the intensity of your fear. What if you could see your fears in bright midday light instead of the exaggerated shadows of anxiety? What if you stepped closer to examine them, the way Kyo learned to approach the snake instead of running from it? You might find that the actual thing is much smaller, much less threatening than the shadow suggested. And what about the shadows within you? The parts of yourself you judge harshly, the flaws you try to hide, the aspects of your personality or your history that you're ashamed of. These cast shadows too. They look monstrous when you refuse to look at them, when you let fear tell you how terrible they are. But when you turn toward them with courage, when you examine them directly instead of avoiding them, you often find they're just human, just part of being alive. Just aspects of yourself that need acknowledgement, not judgment. Rest now in the understanding that most of what frightens you is shadow, not substance. Your fears are real, yes, but what you fear is often an exaggeration, a distortion, an illusion created by poor lighting and unfortunate angles. The actual challenges you face are manageable. The real you beneath all the shadows is capable and whole. The darkness you're afraid of is just the absence of light, and light returns with each morning. Let your fears cast their shadows if they must. You don't have to fight them or deny them. Just recognize them for what they are, shadows, not the things themselves, and know that shadows, no matter how large or dark or menacing they appear, cannot hurt you. They're just shapes in the absence of light. They have no substance. They cannot touch you. Sleep peacefully tonight, knowing that the monsters are shadows, and the shadows will shrink when you bring them into the light of honest attention. You are not your fears. You are not the shadows those fears cast. You are the awareness that can see both the thing and its shadow, that can distinguish between actual danger and exaggerated perception, that can step closer and discover again and again that what looked huge from a distance is quite small up close. Rest in this truth. The garden snake is just a small creature that eats insects. The shadow was just a shadow. And you are safe. You've always been safe. The threat was never as large as it looked. It never is. The path of Zen unfolds like morning mist, soft and patient. In this next tale, we are invited to see, beyond appearance, into essence. Listen carefully to the next story. In a mountain monastery, there was a pond that perfectly reflected the sky above it. At night, when the moon was full, there would appear to be two moons, one in the sky and one in the water. A young monk named Daiki was troubled by this. Which is the real moon, he would ask, the one in the sky or the one in the water? The other monks would laugh. Obviously, the one in the sky is real. The one in the water is just a reflection. But Daiki wasn't satisfied with this answer. He would sit by the pond for hours, watching both moons. The moon in the water was just as bright, just as beautiful, just as present to his vision as the moon in the sky. In what sense was it less real? He asked his teacher, Master Hakuin, "If I can see the moon in the water, if it affects me just as much as the moon in the sky, how is it not real?" Hakuin smiled. "Touch the moon in the sky." "I can't. It's too far away." "Touch the moon in the water!" Daiki reached toward the pond, but as his hand approached the water, the moon's reflection rippled and fragmented. "I can't touch that one either." "Then in what way is one more real than the other?" Hakuin asked. "Both exist in your experience. Both affect you. Both are impossible to grasp. What makes you think reality and reflection are different things?" This question opened something in Daiki's understanding. He had been taught to distinguish between real and reflected, original and copy, substance and shadow. But his experience didn't support these neat distinctions. When he looked at the moon in the water, he really saw it. The experience of seeing it was real, even if what he was seeing was a reflection. When he felt moved by its beauty, the emotion was real, regardless of whether he was looking at the original or the reflection. His life, his experience, his feelings, all of these were happening in response to both moons equally. He began to wonder about other reflections in his life. When he thought about his deceased mother, was he experiencing his actual mother, or just a memory, a reflection of who she had been? Yet his love for her was real. His grief was real. The way she had shaped him was real. Did it matter that he could only access a reflection of her, not her actual presence? When he read teachings from ancient masters, was he experiencing their actual wisdom or just reflections of it, filtered through translation and time and his own interpretation? Yet the teachings affected him, changed him, helped him. The reflections had real power. When he practiced meditation and caught glimpses of what the teachings called his true nature, was he experiencing the actual thing or just reflections of it in his limited consciousness. Yet whatever he was experiencing, it was transforming his life. One evening, Daiki sat by the pond with Master Hakuin, watching the two moons. "Master," Daiki said, "I think I've been making a mistake. I've been trying to distinguish between the real and the reflected, but everything I experience is in some sense a reflection. I never touch reality directly. I only experience reflections of it in my consciousness, interpretations of it through my senses, and understanding. If I dismiss all reflections as unreal, I dismiss my entire life." Hakuin nodded. "This is a good understanding. The question isn't whether something is real or reflected. The question is whether you're aware that you're looking at a reflection, or whether you mistake the reflection for the only reality." He pointed at the moon in the water. "The danger isn't in seeing this moon. The danger is in thinking this is the only moon, in believing that your reflection of reality is reality itself. But if you know you're seeing a reflection, if you remain aware that there's something beyond what you can directly experience, then the reflection serves its purpose. It points you toward what it reflects." Over the following months, Daiki deepened this understanding. He learned to appreciate reflections without mistaking them for the whole truth. He could love his memory of his mother while knowing it was a reflection of her, not her actual presence. He could value teachings while knowing they were fingers pointing at truth, not truth itself. He could work with his experiences in meditation while knowing they were reflections of his true nature, not the full reality of it. He found this understanding incredibly freeing. He no longer needed to grasp the ungraspable or fully understand the incomprehensible. He could work with reflections, learn from them, be transformed by them, without needing them to be more than what they were. One day, a new student came to the monastery and asked Daiki the same question he had once asked. "Which moon is real? The one in the sky, or the one in the water?" Daiki smiled, remembering his own confusion. "Both are real," he replied. "One is the original, one is the reflection. But your experience of both is real. The light from the sky moon and the light from the water moon both enter your eyes. Both create responses in your consciousness. Both affect you. The only difference is that you can't directly touch either one, and one will remain even if you disturb the water." He looked at the two moons thoughtfully. Most of what we call our life is reflection. Reflection of the past in memory. Reflection of reality in consciousness. Reflection of truth in words and concepts. We live in a world of reflections. This isn't a problem unless we forget that they're reflections. Then we start fighting about whose reflection is most accurate, claiming our interpretation is the only real one, trying to grasp what can't be grasped. The new student asked, "So, how should we relate to reflections?" "Appreciate them," Daiki replied. "Learn from them. Be transformed by them, but hold them lightly. Know that they point to something beyond themselves. The moon in the water shows you where to look for the moon in the sky. Your experiences point you toward the truth beyond experience. Your understanding reflects reality, but isn't identical to reality. This awareness keeps you humble and keeps you seeking." Years later, when Daiki became a teacher, he would often bring students to the pond on full moon nights. He would have them look at both moons and ask, "Which is real?" Some students would confidently say the sky moon was real and the water moon was just a reflection. Daiki would ask them, then why can you see them both equally well? Why does the water moon move you just as much as the sky moon? Other students, trying to be clever, would say both were real. Daiki would ask them, then why does one remain when you throw a stone in the water and the other doesn't? A few students would grow quiet, realizing the question itself was based on assumptions that didn't hold up under examination. These were the students Daiki knew were ready for deeper teaching. The question which is real assumes reality and reflection are opposites, he would tell these students. But actually, reflection is a form of reality. It's a real reflection, a real experience, a real perception. The problem isn't with reflection itself. The problem is when we mistake partial reflection for complete reality. When we think our limited experience encompasses the whole truth. When we cling to our interpretations as if they were the things themselves. He would point at the two moons. Your life is like looking at these moons. You're always experiencing reflections, never the thing itself. You reflect reality through your senses, your consciousness, your understanding. This reflection is a real experience. It shapes you, teaches you, transforms you. But it's not the whole story. Stay aware of this. Appreciate your reflections. Learn from them. But don't mistake them for the unreflected reality. One student asked, "Will we ever experience unreflected reality? Will we ever see beyond reflection?" Daiki was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Perhaps in death, perhaps in enlightenment, perhaps never. I don't know, but I know this. The effort to see beyond reflection is itself valuable. The awareness that we're experiencing reflection keeps us humble, keeps us seeking, keeps us from absolutizing our limited perspectives. And sometimes in rare moments of clarity, the reflection becomes so perfect, so transparent, that the distinction between reflected and unreflected almost disappears. Those moments of clarity are themselves gifts of the reflective nature of consciousness. Tonight, as you rest, you might consider that your entire experience right now is a reflection. These words are reflections of ideas. Your understanding of them is a reflection of the words. Your sense of yourself is a reflection of something deeper. Your thoughts are reflections of the underlying mental activity you don't directly experience. Everything you know comes to you as a reflection. This doesn't make your experience less real. It makes it what it is, a real experience of reflected reality. You're seeing the moon in the water, and that seeing is genuine, even if what you're seeing is a reflection. Let this understanding help you hold everything a bit more lightly tonight. Your worries are reflections of possible futures. Your regrets are reflections of the past. Your sense of who you are is a reflection of something deeper and more mysterious than you can fully know. All of these reflections are real experiences, but they are not the whole truth. Rest in the understanding that you live in a world of reflections, and that's actually okay. You don't need to grasp the ungraspable or fully understand the mystery. You can appreciate the moon in the water without needing to hold the moon in the sky. You can live with reflections, learn from them, be moved by them, without mistaking them for everything that is. Both moons are beautiful. Both are real in their own way. And you, experiencing both, are having a real experience of something that transcends both. Rest in that paradox tonight. Rest in reflection. Rest in the mystery of experiencing what you can never fully grasp. It's enough. It's always been enough. The reflection of peace is peaceful. The reflection of rest is restful. You don't need the original when the reflection serves you so well. Sleep now, watching both moons, knowing both are real and neither is everything. That's the truth. That's enough. In the capital city, there was a mirror maker named A.G. who had perfected his craft over decades. His mirrors were renowned for their clarity. When you looked into one of A.G.'s mirrors, you saw yourself exactly as you were. No distortion, no wavering, no cloudiness. Just pure, clear reflection. But A.G. had a strange habit that puzzled his apprentices. After crafting each mirror, after polishing it to perfect clarity, he would sit before it for an hour just looking. Not at his own reflection, but at the mirror itself. Or so it seemed. When asked what he was doing, he would only smile and say, "I'm learning from it." One day, a young apprentice named Hannah gathered her courage and asked directly, "Master, what does a mirror have to teach?" "It only reflects what's placed before it." A.G. gestured for her to sit beside him in front of a newly completed mirror. "Look at this mirror," he said. "What do you see?" "I see my reflection," Hannah replied. "Yes. And what does the mirror think about your reflection?" Hannah frowned. "Mirrors don't think." "Exactly. The mirror doesn't think you're beautiful or ugly. It doesn't judge you as good or bad. It doesn't prefer one face over another. It simply reflects what is, without adding anything of its own. This is the mirror's teaching." He stood up and moved away, leaving the mirror empty of human reflections. "Now what does it reflect?" he asked. "The wall behind it, the window, the light. And does it complain that the wall is less interesting than a human face? Does it wish the light would be different? Does it try to improve what it reflects?" "No," Hannah said slowly, beginning to understand. "It just reflects whatever appears before it, without preference." "This," A.G. said, sitting back down, "is how I try to experience life. Like a mirror, awareness that reflects everything, without distortion, without judgment, without trying to change what appears." Hannah thought about this. But we're not mirrors. We have thoughts, feelings, preferences. We judge constantly. "Yes," A.G. agreed, "but beneath all those thoughts and judgments is pure awareness. The part of you that simply sees, simply knows, simply experiences without adding commentary. This awareness is like a mirror. It reflects your thoughts, but it doesn't judge them. It reflects your feelings, but it doesn't resist them. It reflects reality, but it doesn't try to change it into something else." He pointed to the mirror again. "When you look in this mirror, it shows you exactly what you are in this moment. If you smile, it shows you smiling. If you frown, it shows you frowning. It doesn't try to make you smile when you're sad. It doesn't criticize you for frowning. It just faithfully, honestly, clearly reflects what is." Hannah stared at the mirror, seeing herself reflected there. She noticed how her mind immediately started judging what she saw. Her nose was too wide, her hair was messy, she looked tired. But the mirror itself held no such judgments. It simply showed her face with perfect neutrality. "The suffering we create," A.G. continued, "comes largely from our inability to be like mirrors. We see what is, and immediately we add our opinions about what is. We see a thought, and we judge it as good or bad. We see a feeling, and we resist it or cling to it. We see reality, and we compare it to how we think it should be. All of this is distortion, adding things that aren't really there. He stood and walked to where several mirrors stood in various stages of completion. He picked up one that was cloudy, its surface rough. "This mirror distorts," he said, showing Hannah the wavy, unclear reflection it produced. "When you look in it, you can't see yourself clearly. Your image is bent, confused. This is what our minds do when they're full of judgment and resistance and preferences. We can't see reality clearly because we're constantly bending it, distorting it, making it into something that confirms our beliefs." He set down the cloudy mirror and picked up one that was highly polished. "But this mirror," he held it up, showing Hannah her clear reflection, "adds nothing. It has no agenda. It doesn't care what appears before it. It just faithfully reflects moment by moment whatever is present. And in that faithful reflection, there's a kind of peace." Over the following weeks, Hannah began to practice what she called mirror awareness. When thoughts appeared in her mind, instead of immediately judging them or getting caught up in their content, she would try to simply reflect them, to be aware that thinking was happening without adding a second layer of thought about the first layer. When emotions arose, instead of immediately trying to push them away or figure out why she was feeling them, she would try to simply reflect them, to notice that sadness was present or anger was present, the way a mirror might notice a cloud passing across its surface. It was harder than she expected. Her mind wanted to comment on everything, to judge, to analyze, to fix. But gradually, she learned to find that space of pure awareness beneath all the commentary. And she discovered that A.G. was right. There was a peace in simply reflecting reality without trying to change it. One evening, a wealthy merchant came to A.G.'s workshop in great distress. He had commissioned an elaborate mirror for his home, but when A.G. delivered it, the merchant had rejected it. "This mirror makes me look old," the merchant complained. "It shows every flaw, every line on my face. I want a mirror that makes me look better." A.G. listened patiently, then said gently, "The mirror shows you exactly as you are. If you look old, it's because you are aging, as all humans do. The mirror doesn't judge this as good or bad. It simply reflects truth." "Then I don't want truth," the merchant said angrily. "I want to look young and handsome." "I could make you a distorted mirror," A.G. offered. "One that softens lines and changes proportions. It would lie to you, but perhaps that would make you happier." The merchant paused, realizing how foolish he sounded. He looked at himself in the clear mirror again, really looked. Yes, he was aging. Yes, there were lines on his face, but the mirror wasn't judging him. Only he was judging himself. "The mirror accepts you exactly as you are," A.G. said softly. "Perhaps you could learn to do the same." The merchant stood there for a long time, looking at his reflection without judgment, trying to see himself the way the mirror saw him. Just a face, just a person, just what is, without the weight of good or bad, young or old, handsome or ugly. Finally, he nodded. "I'll take the mirror," he said quietly. Years later, when Hannah had become a master mirror maker herself, students would ask her the same question she had once asked A.G. What does a mirror have to teach? And she would reply, just as Eiji had, a mirror teaches us pure awareness. It shows us that we can experience life without constantly judging it, resisting it, trying to change it into something else. We can simply reflect what is, clearly and faithfully, without distortion. And in that clear reflection, we find a peace that judgment can never provide. She would hold up a polished mirror, turning it so light played across its surface. Your deepest nature is like this mirror, pure awareness that reflects everything but clings to nothing, that sees everything but judges nothing, that accepts everything exactly as it is. When you can rest in this mirror-like awareness, even for a moment, you discover that peace doesn't depend on changing what you reflect. It depends on reflecting clearly, without adding the distortion of your own resistance and judgment. Tonight, as you rest, you might practice mirror awareness. Let thoughts appear and disappear like images crossing a mirror's surface. Let feelings rise and fall like reflections that come and go. Don't judge what appears. Don't try to change it. Just reflect it clearly, the way a mirror reflects light, faithfully, honestly, without adding anything of your own. You are not the content of your thoughts and feelings. You are the awareness that reflects them. And that awareness, like a perfect mirror, is always clear, always peaceful, always unchanged by whatever passes across its surface. Rest in your mirror nature tonight. Reflect everything, cling to nothing, judge nothing. Just be aware, purely and simply aware, and let that awareness be enough. In the hush of understanding, Zen offers us another glimpse of what it means to recognize worth not by weight or shine, but by presence. Here starts the next story. In a prosperous town, there was a merchant named Isamu who seemed to have everything a person could want. He owned the largest trading company in the region. His warehouses were full of goods from distant lands. His home was filled with luxuries. His closets overflowed with fine clothing. His tables were always laden with the best food. Yet Isamu was never satisfied. When he acquired a new property, he immediately began planning how to acquire the next one. When he closed a profitable deal, he was already anxious about the next quarter's numbers. When he purchased something expensive and rare, the pleasure lasted only until he heard about something even more rare that someone else owned. He was like a man dying of thirst at a banquet, surrounded by abundance but unable to drink. A traveling monk named Shin-en arrived in town one day and took up residence at the local temple. People came to him with their problems, and he offered what wisdom he could. His reputation reached Isamu, who decided to visit, not because he thought he had a problem, but because meeting a famous monk was another item to acquire, another experience to collect. "Monk Shinen," Isamu said, bowing respectfully, "I've heard you can help people find peace. Though I must tell you, I'm quite content. I just came to hear your wisdom for my own edification." Shinen looked at Isamu carefully, at his expensive robes, his distracted eyes, the way his fingers drummed constantly against his leg. "I see," the monk said. "Would you like some tea?" "Yes, that would be fine." Shinen prepared tea, but when he poured it into Isamu's cup, he poured very little, just barely enough to wet the bottom of the cup. "More, please," Isamu said, surprised. Shin-en poured another small amount. "That's not enough!" "Fill the cup." Shinnen poured a bit more but still left the cup mostly empty. "Why won't you fill my cup?" Isamu asked, irritated now. "Why won't you fill yours?" Shinnen replied quietly. Isamu looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I don't have the teapot. You have warehouses of goods, rooms of treasures, accounts full of money. Your life's cup is overflowing, yet you sit there telling me it's not enough, demanding more. How is this different from asking me to fill a cup that's already full?" Isamu opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked down at the barely filled teacup. "I'm going to tell you a story," Shinnen said, setting down the teapot. "In Buddhist teaching, there are beings called hungry ghosts. They're depicted with huge, swollen bellies and tiny, narrow throats. They're always hungry because their enormous appetite can never be satisfied through their constricted throats. They're surrounded by food, but they can never eat enough to fill their vast emptiness." He poured a full cup of tea now and set it before Isamu. "You're not poor," Shinnen continued. "You're not lacking in resources. But you're a hungry ghost nonetheless. You have the belly of enormous craving and the throat of acquisition that can never satisfy that craving. So no matter how much you accumulate, you remain empty." Isamu felt something uncomfortable stirring in his chest. He thought about the meal he'd eaten that morning. Expensive delicacies from across the sea. Had he even tasted them? He'd been thinking about a business deal the whole time, eating mechanically, barely noticing the food. "How do I stop being a hungry ghost?" he asked quietly. "By noticing that you're trying to fill an emptiness with things that cannot fill it," Shinnen replied. "The emptiness isn't in your warehouses or your accounts. It's here." He touched his own chest. "You feel this hole inside you, this sense of not enough, and you think more possessions, more success, more experiences will fill it, but they can't. You're trying to solve a spiritual problem with material solutions. So I should give everything away? Become poor? No, poverty wouldn't solve your problem either. You'd just be a hungry ghost with empty hands instead of full ones. The problem isn't what you have or don't have. It's the craving itself. It's the inability to be present and satisfied with what is." Shinnen gestured to the full teacup. "Drink this. Actually drink it. Don't think about anything else. Just taste the tea." Isamu lifted the cup and drank. He tried to focus only on the experience, the warmth of the liquid, the slightly bitter taste, the subtle aroma. For perhaps 10 seconds, he was fully present with just this simple experience of drinking tea. "How was it?" Shinnen asked. "It was good. Really good, actually. You've probably drunk 1,000 cups of tea. Have you tasted many of them? Or were you always thinking about something else, wanting something else, planning something else?" Isamu realized he couldn't remember the last time he had actually paid attention to something he was experiencing. He was always partly elsewhere, partly in the future he was planning, partly in the past he was analyzing, partly in the fantasy of what he didn't yet have. He was never fully here. "The hungry ghost," Shinnen explained, "suffers not from lack of food, but from inability to digest. You suffer not from lack of good things in your life, but from inability to receive them, to be nourished by them. Every experience, every possession, every achievement passes through you without truly being absorbed, because you're already reaching for the next thing. Isamu stayed with Shinen for many hours that day and returned many times over the following months. The monk taught him something radical: how to stop in the middle of craving and simply notice it. When you feel that sense of "I need more, I must have that, this isn't enough," Shinen instructed, stop. Don't act on the craving immediately, just feel it. Notice where it lives in your body. Notice how it thinks it knows what will satisfy you, and then notice whether this craving has ever truly been satisfied by getting what it wanted. Isamu began this practice. When he felt the urge to acquire something new, he would pause. He would notice the craving, how it felt like a kind of pain, like hunger or thirst, how it promised that satisfaction was just one more acquisition away. And he began to notice something he had never seen before. The craving was never satisfied. Every time he gave into it, every time he acquired what he thought he needed, the craving would subside for a moment, and then immediately attach to something else. He wasn't filling the emptiness. He was feeding an insatiable appetite that grew larger the more he fed it. One day, Isamu was in his warehouse, looking at shelves packed with goods. He'd been feeling the urge to acquire a rare textile from a distant province, but instead of immediately sending someone to purchase it, he paused. He looked around at what he already had, really looked. Fabrics of incredible beauty, objects of real value, things that craftspeople had poured their skill into creating. When had he last really appreciated any of them? He picked up a piece of silk, feeling its texture, noticing its quality. He had owned this for 3 years and had never really looked at it. He had bought it, stored it, and forgotten it, his attention already on the next acquisition. For the first time, he felt something that wasn't craving. It was appreciation, gratitude even, for what was actually here. The urge to acquire the new textile didn't disappear entirely, but it loosened its grip. Maybe he didn't need it. Maybe what he already had was enough. Years passed. Isamu remained a successful merchant, but his relationship with his success changed completely. He still worked, still traded, still earned money, but the desperate quality was gone. He could enjoy what he had, instead of always straining toward what he didn't have. When Shinen prepared to leave town, continuing his travels, Isamu came to say goodbye. "Thank you," Isamu said, bowing deeply. "You taught me how to not be a hungry ghost." "I taught you nothing," Shinen replied. "You already had everything you needed. You just weren't present enough to receive it. The hungry ghost doesn't lack food. He lacks the ability to taste what's in his mouth because he's already thinking about the next bite. You learned to actually taste your life. That's all." He smiled and placed a hand on Isamu's shoulder. "The irony is that now, with less craving, you probably enjoy your wealth more than when you were desperately accumulating it. Satisfaction doesn't come from having everything. It comes from being present to what you have. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, you might notice your own hungry ghost. The part of you that always wants more, that's never quite satisfied, that's already thinking about tomorrow instead of receiving today. What if, just for these hours of rest, you allowed yourself to be satisfied? What if nothing needed to be added, improved, or changed? What if this moment, exactly as it is, was enough? The craving promises that satisfaction is just ahead, just out of reach. One more thing, one more achievement, one more experience. But that satisfaction never arrives, because craving itself is the obstacle to satisfaction. Let yourself rest in enoughness tonight. You have enough. You are enough. This moment is enough. The hungry ghost can rest now. Let satisfaction come not from adding more, but from finally, fully receiving what's already here. At the edge of a farming village stood a mountain that had always been there, as far back as anyone's memory reached. It wasn't a particularly large mountain, but it cast a shadow over the village's fields each afternoon, shortening the growing season and limiting what the farmers could cultivate. The villagers had long accepted this as simply the way things were. The mountain was immovable. It had been there since time beyond memory. Complaining about it was like complaining about the sky or the sea. But there lived in the village an old woman named Uma, who had a different way of looking at things. One morning, the village headman was surprised to see Ume walking to the mountain carrying a small basket. He watched as she filled the basket with stones and soil from the mountain's base, carried it to the far edge of the village and emptied it. Then she walked back and did it again. "Ume-san," the headman called out. "What are you doing?" "I'm moving the mountain," Uma replied simply, filling her basket again. The headman laughed, thinking she was joking. But didn't laugh. She carried her basket to the far edge of the village, emptied it, and returned for another load. Over the following days, people noticed that continued this pattern. Every morning, she would make trip after trip, carrying small amounts of earth and stone from the mountain to the village edge. Each basket held perhaps as much as could fit in 2 hands. Each trip took about 10 minutes there and back. People began to talk about it. Some thought she'd lost her mind. Others thought it was a harmless eccentricity of old age. A few found it inspiring in a quixotic way, though none joined her in the work. Ume's grandson, Kenji, was embarrassed. "Grandmother," he said one evening, "people are laughing at you. You're trying to move a mountain with a basket. You're wasting your time. The mountain will still be there long after you're gone." Ume looked at him with those eyes that had seen 7 decades of life. "Perhaps," she said, "but it will be a smaller mountain. And if others join me, it will be smaller still. And if they don't join me, well, I'll spend my remaining years doing something I believe in, rather than doing nothing because the task seems too large." "But you'll never finish." "No," agreed, "I won't. But I'm not trying to finish. I'm just doing what can be done today. Today, I can move many baskets of earth. Tomorrow, I can move many more. The mountain doesn't have to be gone for my work to matter." She pointed to the path she had been walking between the mountain and the village edge. "See? The path is already becoming smoother from my feet. That's one change. And that pile of earth I've been building, small plants are beginning to grow in it. That's another change. The mountain itself, if you look carefully at the base where I've been working, you can see a small difference already. These are real changes, even if they're small." Kenji looked at his grandmother with new eyes. He had been measuring her work against the impossible goal of moving the entire mountain, but she was measuring it differently, by what could actually be done each day, and the small, real changes that resulted. The next morning, Kenji showed up with his own basket. "I can't move a mountain," he told his grandmother, "but I can move many baskets." They worked together, and the work felt different to Kenji than he expected. There was something meditative about it. The simple repetition, the clear, physical progress of each trip, the way the pile on the village edge grew visibly day by day. Within a week, 3 other villagers joined them. They didn't believe the mountain would be moved exactly, but they were moved by Ume's determination, and they discovered what she already knew. There was satisfaction in doing a small thing consistently, even if the ultimate goal seemed impossibly distant. Within a month, 12 people had joined. They organized themselves, creating a relay system that was more efficient than each person making the full round trip. Children got involved, carrying small amounts. Some people could only help for a few minutes each day, but those minutes added up. A traveling monk passed through the village and, seeing this unusual activity, asked what was happening. "The old woman is moving the mountain," someone told him, pointing at Uma. The monk walked over to where Ume was filling her basket and sat down beside her. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Because the mountain blocks the light from our fields," Ume said. "And because it can be done." "But surely you don't think you can move the entire mountain?" "I don't know what I can ultimately accomplish," Uma replied, "but I know what I can do today. Today, I can move this basket of earth from here to there. Tomorrow, I can do the same. If I do this every day, change happens. Maybe small change. Maybe not the complete change I might wish for, but change nonetheless." She stood up, her basket full, ready for another trip. Most people don't attempt good things because they don't believe they can finish them. But finishing isn't the point. Beginning is the point. Continuing is the point. Making whatever progress is possible is the point. The monk watched her walk away with her basket and found himself picking up a basket too. A year passed. The mountain was still a mountain. But the base where the villagers had been working was noticeably different. Perhaps 3 feet of height had been removed from that section. The pile on the village edge had become a small hill itself, and farmers were already using it to expand their growing space. More importantly, something had changed in the village itself. People had discovered that huge things could be approached through small, consistent actions. Problems that had seemed immovable could at least be moved a little, and moving something a little was better than standing still in despair or resignation. A farmer began applying this principle to a field that had been choked with stones. Everyone had always said it was impossible to farm, too many rocks. But the farmer began removing 1 stone at a time, day after day. Within 2 years, the field was productive. A craftsman who had always dreamed of mastering a complex technique, but thought he was too old to learn, began practicing for just an hour each day. Within 3 years, he had developed real skill. The village began to change, not because the mountain was gone, it wasn't, but because people had learned something from Ume's example. Impossibility is often just the sum of many possible small actions that no one has been willing to take consistently. 5 years after began her work, she passed away in her sleep. By that time, a significant section of the mountain's base had been moved, and the shadow it cast was measurably smaller. The growing season in the affected fields had lengthened by nearly a month. At her funeral, the village headman spoke. Ume-san taught us that we are not powerless in the face of large obstacles. We are not required to move mountains overnight. We are only required to move what we can move today. And if we do that, day after day, mountains do move. Perhaps slowly, perhaps incompletely, but they move. 20 years later, travelers coming to the village would notice something unusual about the mountain. One entire side of it was significantly lower than the other and continued to be worked on by villagers who had made it a tradition. They no longer asked whether they would finish. They simply carried their baskets, knowing that their small daily actions were part of something larger than themselves. The mountain, which had seemed eternal and immovable, had proven to be neither. It was simply a very large pile of earth and stone, and any pile, no matter how large, can be moved one basket at a time if someone has the patience to keep moving baskets. Tonight, as you rest, you might think about the mountains in your own life, the problems that seem too large, the changes that seem impossible, the goals that seem unreachable. You don't have to move these mountains tonight. You don't have to solve these problems completely. You just have to carry one basket when morning comes, and then another, and another. Great changes don't happen through massive single efforts. They happen through small, consistent actions that seem insignificant in the moment but accumulate into something transformative over time. Rest now in the knowledge that you don't have to do everything. You don't have to achieve completion. You just have to move what can be moved today, and trust that small movements, repeated faithfully, are how all mountains eventually move. As the lantern of awareness glows a little brighter, we come to a tale about seeing with more than the eyes. Let the stillness guide you now, and listen carefully to the next story.